Alright, good evening everyone. It being 6:04, I'll declare the Ordinary Council meeting of the Shire of Capel open. We wish to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land we are meeting on, the Wadani people. We wish to acknowledge and respect their continuing connection to the land, waters and community. We pay our respects to all members of the Aboriginal communities and their culture, and to their elders past and present, their descendants who are with us today and those who will follow in their footsteps. Record of attendance, we have 7 councillors in attendance tonight, with Councillor McCleary on a leave of absence. There are no response to previous public questions taken on notice. Public question time. Do we have any questions? No, I'll move along to applications for leave of absence. Are there any applications? No. Declarations of interest, I have 4. From myself, Councillor Kitchen, proximity interest in item 14.4, the program of works for roads. Councillor Tarantroy, impartiality in item 15.1, the budget submissions. And I have 2 declarations of proximity in items 14.4 and 14.5 from Councillor Dillon, being the roads programs of works and the path and trails programs of work. There are no notice of items to be discussed behind closed doors, so we'll move to the confirmation of the previous minutes of the Council the meeting on the 22nd of February 2023. Is there a mover for those minutes? Councillor Andrew. A seconder? Councillor Tarantroy. Is there any discussion on those minutes? No, I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Announcements by the presiding member without discussion. Just have one. The Shire of Capel Council now has 8 elected members following the departure of former councillor David Clues. The Shire of Capel would like to thank Mr Dave Clues for his service to the council since 2019. During his tenure, Mr Clues' contribution to council decisions and committees were robust and focused on a responsive local government with financial prudence. Recent service to the council included chairing the Climate Change Adaptation and Sustainability Committee. Dave's focus on always making himself available for community members, ensuring the Shire was responsive to community requests, ensuring that quality, value and money services and activities were provided to residents. His dedication to this should be acknowledged. I wish Mr Clues all the best for the future. Petitions, deputations and presentations. We have 2 presentations this evening. First up, we have a presentation from Tom Hockley of Aldering & Associates on item 14.3, amendment to existing extractive industry lots 2644 and 348 Jules Road, Joolarup.
Thank you very much, Shire President, councillors and staff. I'm here tonight speaking on behalf of Wholesome Australia in relation to item 14.3. Firstly, I wanted to support the officer recommendation for approval to amend Condition 8 of the original approval. Condition H relates to the maximum number of truck movements to and from the site per day. Under the original approval granted by Council in November, this number was limited to 78 movements. However, since November, and through consultation with agreement with Shire officers, we've provided a scientific basis upon which the truck numbers on Jules Road would be capable and appropriate of exceeding 78 truck movements up to a maximum of 94 movements to and from the site per day. This justification has been set out in the Transport Impact Statement prepared by DVC Consultants, which has now been assessed by officers and affirms the suitability of the proposed traffic numbers. Importantly also, the original application did not propose a cap in referencing the anticipated truck movements to and from the site per day at 78. We expect that for most operations, truck traffic would be much less. However, if the numbers were to exceed 78 movements to and from the site per day on a very infrequent occasion, for example, if a specific tender was called for a major project that required a specific volume of product to be delivered in a short duration, the original condition would have prevented Wholesome's ability to tender for such a project without having the certainty of the CEO's consent. notwithstanding the greater flexibility that amended condition H will provide the quarry operator, the proposal overall will result in a far more favourable outcome for the Jullorop community in terms of truck movements and amenity benefits, given that at present, truck traffic enters and exits the facility via Jules Road, which is a local road that is shared with the Jullorop community, and under the approval, a new internal haul road to Hastings Road is proposed that will ultimately remove all truck traffic from Jules Road. With the construction of the Bunbury Outer Ring Road, Hastings Road will be closed to the public from Jules Road with a dedicated connection to the bore that will remove truck traffic from local roads once constructed. Finally, we also note that no complaints have been received regarding the current operational arrangement and the volume of trucks currently operating to and from the site. This has been confirmed in the officer's report. So in summary, we commend the officer recommendation with respect to the minor modification of condition H, and we would therefore respectfully seek the council's support for the officer's recommendation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Hockley. Any questions? Councillor Andrew? Sorry, Councillor, your microphone.
You've said that in the original development application you didn't propose a cap. So in the development application that was attached to the agenda back in November, you actually requested a cap of 70 truck movements a day. That was going to be the cap that was in the paperwork. So a bit of a fib there. I'm not sure if you prepared the document or not, but what you've just said isn't necessarily accurate. You did propose a cap of 70. The other issue I've got, to be honest, is that we then provided you with a 10% leeway. So if we're starting at the 70 as a base point, which was what you requested, which is where I'm starting from, going to 94, that's over a 30% increase.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm led to believe that you think that the process that we came up with in November was clunky, as in you're required to send an email to the CEO to request further truck movements up to 94. What exactly about emailing the CEO to request that is clunky, given that when submission requests for tenders are advertised, it's not like you are requested to respond and submit your request within 24 or 48 hours. These tender processes are open for weeks. So what about the process that we put in place in November is clunky or unworkable?
No problem. Thank you for the question. In relation to the first question to do with the 70 movements, from my recollection in preparing the report, we put in an estimated number of 70 based on the existing operations, as it was a renewal essentially of a pre-existing operation. I'm sorry, I don't recall seeking that as a cap, but I would just need to check that. In relation to the question about the process seeking increased numbers, look, I guess, yes, I hear what you're saying in terms of tender process. It's probably more of an operational question, which I don't have, I suppose, all the information in front of me, but I guess where a specific quantity of material is required at short notice, which I believe happens from time to time, there may be issues or I suppose timing problems in seeking the consent of the CEO. I suppose it just opens the process up to unnecessary delays, given that, as we've demonstrated in the additional information that we've provided, the road capacity and the capacity of Jules Road and Hastings Road and the potential impacts on amenity, dust, noise, things like that, have been assessed and considered acceptable based on that number. Yeah.
Any further questions? Councillor Dillon.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for your presentation. What would you consider, or what could you explain to Council what a short notice contract would entail? Like, are you talking a week? Are you talking a fortnight? What sort of time frame are you sort of talking about?
As I said, I mean, it's probably an operational thing. I don't know enough about the operational elements of the Wholesome operations to comment as to whether it would be a week, half a week, 2 weeks. Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't answer that question, but I suppose the point is it removes any uncertainty, regardless of the time frame, seeking the consent of the CEO. Given that, I suppose the other point to make importantly is that the condition requiring the cap has been a new condition that's been put onto the approval, which hasn't existed in previous approvals. And so the point I made about the operations being conducted over the years without concern from residents in relation to the truck movements also goes to the point that whilst we accept a condition requiring a cap, and you know, we've come up with a workable solution through advice from our traffic consultants. In the event that the quarry connects to Hastings Road, which it will when the bore is complete, that cap will no longer be required because the trucks will be free to move in and out of the quarry at their wish. So I suppose we're putting our best foot forward essentially to, I suppose, acknowledge the Jalora community and the comments that were made, but also come up with a response that's workable in the situation on a short-term basis, basically. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Hockley. We have a second presentation from Amanda Butterworth from Aldering and Associates on item 14.2, Local Planning Policy 6.2, Extractive Industries.
Hello, thank you, Shire President, elected members and staff. I'm here representing some of the larger extractive industry businesses, including Hanson and Catalano, and seek your support to defer consideration of the extractive industry local planning policy. I'm advised that a separate submission has been lodged to the Shire CEO by the peak industry body, being the Cement, Concrete and Aggregates Australia, and they similarly request that consideration of the local planning policy be deferred. One of our primary concerns in regard to the draft policy before you tonight is the aspect of the time-limited approval. The quarries that are run by the likes of Hanson are not short-term. They have supplies of hard rock for upwards of 30 years, and approvals sought are usually for a time-limited approval for 20 years. Given the financial input into establishing a quarry, there has to be confidence that the extractive industry operators that the approval will run for a period that ensures the financial viability of the quarry can be reached. We note that as a result of advertising, the draft policy was modified specifically to refer to hard rock quarries having an approval period of up to 10 years. And we support the increase in the time-limited approval period from that advertised, but we respectfully request that consideration be given to a 20-year time frame for hard rock quarries specifically, as the Shire has approved in the past on other approvals. In addition, we request that you consider seeking a extending the 5-year extraction period for larger sand operators such as Catalano, and that be increased to 8 years extraction. When the policy was advertised, as outlined in the officer report, the policy did not include Appendix 1 to the policy. We note that the officer report says that Appendix 1 was uploaded to the Shire's website on the 24th of January. Our submission that we lodged was dated the 31st of January, and as outlined in our submission, when we received a copy of the policy and uploaded the document from the Shire's website, Appendix 1 wasn't there. So our submission didn't include Appendix 1. We consider this to be an integral part of the policy, and we would like the opportunity to review and provide input into Appendix 1. And we do have that valuable input, but with 5 minutes here for you this evening, I just don't have time to go through the comments on our concerns and matters that we'd like to say in regard to Appendix 1. And therefore we see the benefit of review of Appendix 1 with industry. The policy and the Appendix 1 do not differentiate assessment of a new extractive industry licence as compared to a renewal of an existing long-standing operation. We consider that the local planning policy and Appendix 1 should differentiate between the policy provisions that will be applicable to an existing operation seeking renewal and those that will be requiring assessment under and for a new extractive industry. We note that the policy seeks to impose restrictions on haulage traffic with school bus routes, and this is a reworded provision in your policy that's put forward to you tonight that is different to that in the advertised policy. Whilst we note that this may be an issue on particular roads, the policy itself does not differentiate between categories or width or condition of roads, nor does it recognise that some vehicles are restricted by main roads in terms of the RAV4 network. Further, the policy doesn't refer to the time of day that particular roads may be of concern. Also, for the extractive industries, delivery times of raw materials may be dependent upon other factors, such as when raw materials is required to be delivered for a project such as construction of a new road. To restrict delivery of product outside school bus route times, in our opinion, or to our knowledge, is not imposed on other industries. And we consider that this provision to be unworkable, particularly when you're dealing with major projects that require delivery of raw product at specified times. But we consider that the specific blanking provision, could be further reviewed, and that this could benefit from input from industry representatives such that we could collaborate and seek to find solutions for these issues. We refer to the performance criteria PC 1.4 in regard to visual impact, which states development shall not have a significant impact on visual amenity of the landscape. We request that this be reworded to minimise impacts to visual amenity. With the construction of the Bunbury Outer Ring Road, some existing quarries in future may be more visually prominent from the new road than what presently exists. The policy does not seek to minimise visual impact, but rather it requires an extractive industry shall not have a significant visual impact. In our opinion, external matters, such as the construction of the bore, are matters that are beyond the control of the extractive industry operators, and these can then affect the visual impact of the extractive industries. So we request the matter of visual amenity be a performance assessment based upon minimising visual impact. In summary, we agree that it's appropriate that the Shire have in place a local planning policy guiding the assessment of extractive industries. We would like the policy to be workable for the extractive industry operators, whilst also achieving the aspiration of the Council in terms of upholding the aims of the scheme. The operators that we represent would, like Council, would prefer that applications for extractive industries to be determined by the Council and come up with satisfactory solutions that are based upon a win-win-win for the Council, the community and the extractive industries without the need to go to the tribunal. We consider that further revisions to the policy that include modifications such as those that I've referred to in my presentation, being developed in consultation with the extractive industry operators, could reduce the likelihood of appeals, and this would benefit the Council and the extractive industry operators. We simply seek that the policy be deferred to enable extractive industry representatives and the Cement, Concrete and Aggregates Australia to attend a workshop with the Council to see if some of these provisions that I've highlighted to you this evening can be amended such that the policy provisions provide certainty to Council and also certainty to the extractive industry in terms of acceptable outcomes. We therefore respectfully request that the item be deferred to enable that further engagement. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Ms Butterworth. Are there any questions? Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Ms Butterworth, for your presentation. If I could, Mr. President, a question more to the CEO or the directors. Are there any financial or legislative implications if we were to defer 14.2 tonight?
The Director of Infrastructure and Development.
There's no financial implications. It's more about getting the policy right.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? No? Thank you, Mr. Butterworth. We now move to motions of which previous notice has been given. 11.1, Councillor Noonan has presented a motion to investigate the creation of an offsets register for potential sites for future offset rehabilitation within the Shire of Capel. That's moved Councillor Noonan. Is there a seconder? Councillor Sciano. Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Mr. President. So yes, I've moved the motion as read. It's been worked on, and I'd like to thank the CEO and Matthew Wansborough as well for their work going through the original motion that I wrote and the ensuring that it fits within, or that what we can present or what we'll do, hopefully get a report that will fit within the legislative framework of the state government and what can be done with environmental offsets. So the reasoning for this motion, councillors will recall that when Boynup Road West was being widened and redeveloped, that we found ourselves in the bizarre situation where there was nowhere in the Shire of Capel for an offsets to be planted or rehabilitated, an offsets area, and we ended up and still paying for an area up at Kemerton to be rehabilitated and used as an offset for work that's being done in the Shire. And I think that for many people in the Shire, that certainly given the clean and green image of Capel Shire, one of the things that I think that a lot of people living in the Shire would pride themselves on would be that we would be a leader in rehabilitation and in providing environmental offsets. The intention or the hope for this motion is that we can develop a register of both public and private land, so that in particular private landowners, including large companies who might own significant proportions of land in the Shire, would be able to offer or come into a legal agreement with the Shire, with the state government if necessary, so that a covenant was placed on a certain portion of their land to provide an offsets, and in particular the sorts of areas or land that we'd look at would be along areas like creek lines or ridge lines to connect remnant areas of native vegetation, to provide wildlife corridors, and so that's really the intention of this motion. So I'd hope that councillors would support the good work that's been done by the CEO and Matthew Wansborough and give them the opportunity to investigate the processes, the legal processes where these conservation covenants might be applied. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Sciano.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think Councillor Noonan's summarised it pretty well, but I mean, my mind goes immediately back to that Boynup West Road, and the two things that I was obviously pretty frustrated with that item, one being the price and two being the location. And obviously this really focuses on the location, and I think as part of that, if we find locations within our Shire and we invest in sites like Councillor Noonan mentions in creating nature corridors and filling the gap between remnant vegetation, well then you see your value there in your community in spending the money on these offsets, because they are a challenge. They will be one of the biggest challenges facing local government finances and processes and planning in the years to come. I think this is great to see this motion come here from Councillor Noonan, so very supportive of that tonight, and ask fellow councillors for their support.
Are there any other speakers for or against? No. Does the mover wish to close?
No, thank you, Mr. President.
I'll put that item to the vote. Those in favour? And that's carried unanimous. We now move to item 13.1, Local Government Elections 2023. Is there a mover for the officer's recommendation? Councillor Sciano. Is there a seconder? Councillor Noonan. The Deputy President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ultimately, I think this item is probably one of common sense. I think there's a couple of things to address here. One is the type of, or the method to conduct the election, so postal election. I think our community's been used to that for a long time. I think in regional local governments, postal vote is vitally important. Even in our state and federal elections, postal voting is a key form of voting in those elections. And I do understand that if you don't pop it in the mail, you can still put it back in the envelope and you can actually drop it off to the Shire building. So it may not necessarily be that you come and stand in a ballot box, but it gets posted out to you. It's a very good system. Obviously, we've all done it because I hope that we've all voted in our local government election. So I think that continues to be the preferred method for a regional local government like us. On the front of obviously filling the vacancy as well, I think it's pretty common sense that having a councillor come in here for a matter of months, having to do the mandatory training, and then being straight back into an election in October 2023 is just not practical. So, yeah, supportive. I think the WAEC again should be is the option to run this local government election for us. That makes sense to me. I just maybe ask the question on the expense. So I think it was 75,000 this time around. Could I ask the question through the chair? Do we remember off the top of our head what the amount was from 2021? I just asked that question because I've had other. Can I get an answer?
The Director of Community and Corporate.
Thank you for your question. Through the chair, my recollection, it was around 55.
Yep. All right, thank you. I just asked that because I've had some other local governments. Actually, I've had a couple calls from some other local governments who said that they are getting huge spikes in the cost of running their elections. And when you're talking about city local governments and you're thinking they're paying up past $200,000 to run an election, a 10% variation, 10-15% variation is obviously pretty tough. In our circumstance, obviously, we're playing with a bit of pocket change compared to them, but that's just something to watch, I think. There's been a huge increase in the price of cost, or the price to pay the WAEC to run these elections. In saying that, important to save costs by not getting priority mail, because I think every time we've had priority mail, they've ended up showing up late anyway. So we've never got the value for money out of the priority mail. So just leave it at standard mail. I think I said that a couple of years ago. But yeah, anyway, other than that, I think ultimately the item, I think it's quite common sense. So commend the item to councillors.
Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd concur with everything that Councillor Sciano has said, certainly about the process and the, having the local government election. One of the things I'd like to highlight is item or point number 3 in that, which authorises the CEO to ask the WAEC for approval to delay the election of a replacement for Councillor Clues through till October. And I'd like to thank President Kitchen for his acknowledgement of the service of Councillor Clues. He made very thoughtful contributions to our debates. He was incisive in his questioning, and his quick wit caught me out on more than one occasion. So I certainly miss him, and I know that this council will miss him. However, I think it does make sense to delay that election of a replacement through till October for all of the reasons that are listed in that motion. So I'd commend the motion. Thank you.
Are there any speakers against the motion? Speakers for? Councillor Terentroy?
I'm not going to repeat what my fellow councillors have said. However, because of the new voting system that it's going to be preferential voting, it makes it more difficult and it will take more time than the previous council elections, which were first past the post. So I also would like to say that Councillor Clues was a champion for his community, and when people took things to him, he took it on and he followed it through. So I miss him sitting at the bench. Thank you.
Are there any other speakers for or against the item? Does the Deputy President wish to close?
Thank you, Mr. President. I think just to address I think Councillor Terentroy has raised a really important point. So optional preferential, so not full preferential. But in regards to some of my queries around costing, they may be trying to consider the fact that rather than taking 30 minutes to count, because it's a pretty quick count in this building sometimes, it's obviously going to take a bit longer to do that. But yeah, I think, but then just also to just echo the sentiments of fellow councillors with Councillor Clues, who was someone who, even before he was on council, was often on the phone to me, and we often caught up for coffee and go down to the bakery and chat about the issues that were going on, and then to have him join us and be part of the team here at council has been a great experience.
I'll put the item to the vote. Those in favour? And that's carried unanimous. We now move to 13.2, Retail Trading Hours, Outcomes of Consultation and Way Forward. Is there a mover? Councillor Sciano. Is there a seconder? Councillor Terentroy. The Deputy President.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm not going to make a habit of moving everything tonight, but these are just a couple of really important ones. Well, they are all important. I'm glad, I'm fully supportive of the outcome and the recommendation that's been brought forward to council for full deregulation. I just want to point out, it is disheartening to see we had all the workshops and the community not to show up to those workshops. But as for the business community, that's good to see a turnout from them. I mean, we ultimately always hear these anecdotal myths about retail trading, and they're not usually coming from small business in the community, they're coming from elsewhere. So to have the small business involved, the people who really have to consider their trading hours and the way that it affects how they practice and run their business, to have them involved and to see them turn out to those workshops is great. I think I said earlier on, when this first came to council, I don't think and don't believe in regulated trading hours, and particularly on Sunday regulated trading hours. I don't think it's a part of a secular society that we should be closing down on a Sunday or certain public holidays. It's good to see that I think there is general sentiment in the community within business that deregulated trading hours is the way forward. I think it's an opportunity for commerce within our Shire, and for the development of our urban district, mainly in Dayalup. I think there's great opportunity there with deregulated trading hours. I think we look at where, as someone growing alongside an Eaton Fair or a Treendale, why were we not up the front there? And I think regulated trading hours may have been a part that played in that, in why we haven't grown in coincide with those places. But also, I mean, one of the comments that stood out to me, consumers tend to find a way to obtain goods and services they seek and have online and retail options in close proximity to the Shire. It also says that when your shops are closed, you're just going to buy it online. I mean, unless you're as impatient as me and you you really can't, you know, obviously it's not America. We don't have Amazon. We can't get next day or same day delivery from an Amazon warehouse down the freeway, but people will jump online if they can't find things locally. So we've got to have the doors open, we've got to welcome people in, and we've got to attract the businesses that are working in that manner. And that's how we get the stuff to the people, and we get it offline, and we get people out of their houses, and we get them downtown, and we get them to wander down the main street and drop into their local, whatever the big box warehouse store may be, or whatever the supermarket or home electronics store may be, but we've got to attract them here somehow. And I think regulation or trading regulation has been a real roadblock in that matter. So glad to see the item before council, glad to see we've gone through a process that we have and engaged with local business, and fully support and commend this item to fellow councillors.
Councillor Terran-Troy.
Well, I'm not going to repeat anything that Councillor Shoshano said. I agree with it all. I think that this is a balanced approach to regulation of trading hours in the Shire, and this creates an environment that supports existing local businesses and encourages new business development and expansion. And also, families are busy people, and often there's double income, so people are busy, and so having the shopping hours or trading hours deregulated allows busy people to be able to get the things that they need. And busy families, busy, everyone's busy. So I commend my fellow councillors to vote for this. Thank you.
Are there any speakers against the item? Speakers for? Councillor Dillon.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to compliment our Deputy President on that rousing speech. Got me quite excited there for a second. I just want to reiterate what my fellow councillors have already said. It's really just about bringing Capel into the new century in some ways, which is great to see. And ultimately, it will still be about choice. If mum and dad businesses want to push the tinny out on a Sunday and not open, they are very, very welcome to do so. In fact, they're encouraged to do so, but it just opens things up to possibilities, and I think that's just what our Shire needs. Thank you.
Are there any other speakers? Councillor Andrew.
Thank you. No, I also concur with Councillor Sciano. I think that proprietors should absolutely be in control of when they open and when they don't, based on their own business needs. And I think the more people that we get on the streets and draw to our trading areas, it's also then the people that are walking past the little bakery and pick something up, or the flower shop, or the newsagents, or whatever else is open. And so it increases traffic and revenue and profitability of the entire area. And I couldn't support this more.
Are there any other speakers on the item? No, I'd just like to echo the comments from my fellow councillors on this item. While the impact of this won't be greatly felt in Capel and Boynup, this will certainly make a big difference in Dalyellup, which is our commercial centre. As I think the Deputy President described it, those big box enterprises are probably the ones that'll definitely benefit the most. But I agree entirely that retail trading operators and businesses should be able to choose their own trading hours to suit the consumer and those who are seeking to use their services. So fully support this, but I'd also just like to acknowledge the work from the administration, in particular the CEO, who has largely spearheaded this and wrote all the background paper and has conducted all the consultation in concert with, I can't remember the name of the group now, but I think it's a job well done. I think this is something that's long overdue in the Shire of Capel and probably puts us a little bit behind some of our regional neighbours, so happy to support. No further speakers? The Deputy President wish to close? No, I'll put that item to the vote. Those in favour? And that's carried unanimous. We now move on to infrastructure and development reports. 14.1, advertisement of draft local planning policy. Is there a mover for that policy? Councillor Sciano. Is there a seconder? Councillor Mogg. The Deputy President.
Thank you, Mr. President. This one it was actually at top of mind this morning. I mean, housing is at top of mind across the board because, as you would have all been hearing, obviously we have a housing shortage across the state, across the country. And one of the biggest challenges I think we have in our housing stock, particularly here in the Shire of Capel and in the southwest, is diversity of housing stock. And the realisation that not everyone can afford or needs a 4x2 in Dalyellup or a special rural property with plenty of land. There are people who simply need a house over their head at the most affordable price possible. And the reason it was actually at the front of mind is that this came up today when the CEO and I met with the Buoyant Up Progress Association, and the fact that that community recognises that there are people struggling who are not in homes, and tiny houses has been something that's been identified through most levels of government as a key or priority for trying to provide that housing stock diversity. Now, to obviously have a policy around that, I think is important, and the draft policy, I think, encourages that and also provides provisions for the way that works from a tourism perspective as well. So tiny houses, obviously, many of us would have stayed at a caravan park where there's also sort of permanent residency and things like that, or you've probably stayed in a similar cabin, when you've been somewhere, and those sort of fit into this category as well. But I cannot stress enough the situation that we are in when it comes to affordable housing. And now we see people who have bought fantastic houses in a great part of the economy who now realising they probably couldn't afford to be in that level of housing stock. And tiny houses are something that just do not exist, and we need to fill that gap. And having policies like this to do so obviously provides us provisions around that. So commend the item to council.
Councillor Mogg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just concur with Councillor Schiano's sentiments. Thank you.
Is there any speaker against the item? Speaker for? Councillor Andrew.
Thank you. I completely concur with Councillor Schiano. However, I actually have big doubts whether or not this policy will address the issues that Councillor Schiano highlighted. And I think it will address a percentage of the market, I've some concerns regarding how these are going to be financed. They're going to be considered a chattel rather than a brick and mortar home. So how people are actually going to be able to afford them and what kind of financing is actually going to be available to them, I don't know. I don't think it's going to qualify them for a mortgage. I think they're going to have to purchase these more with a personal loan. They're also going to have to purchase the land. And I think what we have a lack of access to is affordable housing, whether it be rental or home ownership. Like I said, I think there's some restrictions on this as whether or not they actually provide cheap home ownership, because you then also need the cheap land, because land prices themselves are a massive issue. What I would actually love to see within our Shire to address the housing shortage is more semi-permanent long-term housing that's provided in places like caravan parks, and address I think that is going to address some of our housing issues more than these sorts of policies. I hope I'm wrong, but that would be my concern. But I think it is definitely one step in providing housing in a bit of a different way. So I support the policy, but I am incredibly doubtful that it's actually going to address some of the real issues that we currently face with our housing market.
Are there any other speakers? Councillor Tarantroy.
Yes, well, I agree in principle with this policy. I believe that there is a place for tiny houses. And as Councillor Andrew highlighted, we don't know the full impact of this policy and the full background information of whether or not it's actually doable as a mortgage. And yes, I agree that the cost of land is the issue to build these tiny houses. Yeah, so I mean, when I read all this, I was thinking of, wouldn't it be lovely to have like a piece of land that we had numerous tiny houses built within, like around, so that there was a central area for that community of people in the tiny houses to meet at. But then again, that land would be expensive. So yeah, I hope that lots of people put public comment in. As it is, this is a beginning to something that can be adapted and changed to suit, and especially if we get those public comments in and submissions from people interested in building these tiny houses as well, because I think again this is another industry that would be faster than building bricks and mortar houses, because most of these will be prefabbed. So when I lived up in the Kimberley, we had a lot of prefabbed homes when we had difficulty housing people, and we called them esky homes. But the only problem was the Singapore ants liked them too, the little tiny black ants. They used to get in and eat all the material in between the metal walls. But yeah, so as long as it's not esky houses, I'm for it. Okay, thank you.
Are there any other speakers on the item? Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Councillors might recall I've been sceptical in the past about the desirability of housing or a frustration, I suppose, with this ongoing trend to see smaller and smaller block sizes. But at the same time, I recognise that, as Councillor Luciano, Councillor Andrew pointed out, we have to have more diversity, more options in the mix to provide accommodation for people, because there are people who are living in very difficult situations, or people who haven't got housing and who are couch surfing and those sorts of things, and they'd much rather have a place of their own. I can certainly see the application of these tiny houses in the tourism market. I don't know so much that there would be private ownership options, or that private ownership options would be done I would imagine, in situations like having trailer parks or even aged over 55s trailer parks, because they are wheeled trailer based homes. I can see people owning the homes, but an organisation owning the larger block. In the attachment, it talks about the possibility of having communal kitchens, communal laundries. One of the things I do actually like about the provisions and the policy is that it's not cramming houses together. So, for example, it points out that on a 750 square metre block, that would be eligible to have 3 50 square metre homes. So there's a sufficient area around each one of those tiny homes to have a patio or a veranda, to have a carport. Each of them have to have a provision for a car bay or carport. So people are not being shoehorned into shoe boxes, and that's there's and I commend the officers for their work on the policy that they've put together. I know that they've been mindful that this option provides another option for the mix to increase the diversity, but it doesn't it's not designed to make an oppressive environment. It's designed to make the option for small homes available for people, but in at enjoyable, pleasant surroundings. So I also commend the motion.
Are there any other speakers to the item? No, I might just say a few things, just echoing a few of the sentiments from my fellow councillors. It's been an interesting discussion on this one. It's sort of revolved a little bit around the actual policy and the planning implications of it, but then also a bit of a discussion on housing affordability. So I'd sort of like to cover both of those points as well. In terms of the policy, I think it's a great initiative. Looking at it away from the affordable housing side of view, I see it as, particularly in Boynup and Capel, we've got a lot of lots which are sort of that quarter acre size, a little bit bigger. This could be an opportunity so that instead of putting another dwelling behind it that's of sufficient size, it could be enabling this sort of smaller package to enable either short stay accommodation, short-term rental, or even just a smaller offering to someone who might not necessarily want to move into a lifestyle village or a retirement home, but they might still want to own a small property they can maintain, they can go away from, but they've still got their own freedom to choose how I want to paint that wall or what plan I want to put out the front. So I think that fills a bit of a gap. I don't necessarily see this as a option for housing affordability. I mean, it'll certainly help, but in terms of housing affordability, I think we're certainly needing to see some more action in that from the higher ups in terms of level of government. But something I'd like to see is perhaps even some more medium density housing come to the Shire of Capel, particularly in the Dalyellup District Centre. That's something that I think we could have a look at there. But I agree with the sentiments of Councillor Noonan that one of the great Australian dream is that you own your home, and in the 50s it was a Menzies era home on a quarter acre block with sweeping verandas, and through the 90s, early 2000s it was a 4x2 brick home, tin roof. The great Australian dream of owning a home shouldn't be today of it's a tiny house on 200 square metres and that's it, and you struggle even before that. So I think that there's two separate issues here. This is a planning issue, a planning matter, which I think is great. It's an initiative. It's something that can certainly help alleviate the pressures of the housing crisis that we currently have in the nation. But I think that's a sort of separate discussion as well. So that's my 2 cents. Are there any other speakers? No. Does the mover wish to close?
Thank you, Mr. President. Look, I generally concur with all the comments made by councillors, and I'll backtrack a little bit to the comment by Councillor Andrews. So, it's obviously correct that you can't mortgage a tiny home because it's still, as seen by the government, because it has to stay on a frame. That even though it's not meant to be transportable, realistically, it's a caravan. I think the way that this does address, of course, and Councillor Kitchens obviously made comment about the realisticness of, or how realistic it is to address some of the challenges. I think the provisions under 1.4 about tiny house community development, I think that's the exciting stuff. I think providing a framework and being ahead of the ball here, because we haven't really gotten to this stage yet from the private sector, we can just because we put up a policy obviously doesn't mean that the private sector is going to do anything with it. But we know this is coming because this is being talked about at a higher level. And so to have a policy in place for that. But I think, and Councillor Noonan summarised, I think a lot of that tiny house community type, the planning framework there, and about not cramming everyone into the sardine can. But ultimately, it's not just always about buying a home, it's also about renting as well. And so, when you've got a tiny house community development, there's obviously a lot of other opportunities that are available there. But otherwise, from a planning perspective, I think it's really well addressed. It will always, I think these will be contentious in the future when they come to council, because it will always be a matter of how does the land use work with the surrounding area. That will always be the argument that we have, and it will ultimately, you know, there are some negative connotations when the term like trailer park is used, but which is something we haven't really gotten onto. But this will always come down to how this land use is compatible with the surrounding land uses, and that's something we'll have to overcome as a council when we get there.
I'll put that item to the vote. Those in favour? And that's carried unanimous. 14.2, Local Planning Policy 6.2, Extractive Industry, Consideration of Submissions and Final Adoption. Is there a mover for the officer's recommendation? Councillor Noonan?
Sorry, a procedural motion, Mr. President. If I could move for the item to be deferred for until the next meeting, to give or until a future date, to give us the opportunity to workshop council officers, councillors, and industry members to workshop the draft policy.
Sure, we'll just get on the board. Did you have a particular date, Councillor?
Through you, perhaps to the CEO, what would be fair and reasonable?
The Chief Executive Officer.
Through you, Chair, I would think that we're heading into quite a problematic month of April with a few public holidays and a few other things. So I think to enable us to do, subject to this being supported by Council, I think to enable us to have enough time to do it properly, I would maybe suggest that we look at bringing the outcome of this subsequent consultation maybe to the Council meeting in May.
So you happy for the May OCM to be entered in there, Councillor? And just a bit more of a description on to allow for further consideration of the policy? Yep. Happy with that motion, Councillor?
Yes, thanks, Mr. President.
Yep. All right, is there a seconder to that motion? Councillor Sciano? Does the mover wish to speak to the deferment?
Only that I thank the two speakers that we've had, and particularly Ms. Butterworth for the comments that she made. I think it makes a lot of sense to have. It makes sense to get the policy right, to be able to talk through any issues that might be there, and the point of having a win-win-win situation for business, for the community, for the council. I think that's what we should really aim for. Thank you.
I'll put that deferment to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? And that deferral is carried 4-3. That item is deferred to the May Ordinary Council meeting for further consideration of the policy. Did you get that? All right, we move to item 14.3, the amendment to existing extractive industry lots 2644 and 348 Jules Road, Jalorup. There is a revocation motion first up, so I need a mover, a seconder and a seconder, should they wish to move the officer's recommendation. Do I have a mover for that recommendation to revoke the decision from the Ordinary Council meeting of 2022/232? Councillor Noonan. Is there a seconder? Councillor Sciano. Is there a seconder? Councillor Dillon. Councillor Noonan.
I'll just move that item, that recommendation is read.
Councillor Sciano. Councillor Dillon. Is there any discussion on that? Councillor Mogg.
Thank you, Mr. President. Regarding 14.3, a question through the chair, please. Actually, I've got two.
Yes, Councillor.
Can you please answer which will happen first, the closure of Hastings Road or the new entry onto the bore?
Sorry, Councillor, we're dealing with just the revocation motion first.
Okay, yep.
And then the, yeah, are you happy for those questions to wait for the next item?
Yes.
Yep.
Thank you.
Are there any speakers on that revocation? Nope. Councillor Noonan, do you wish to discuss it in further? No, I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? And that's carried 6-1, sorry. We now move to Officer's Recommendation 2. Is there a mover for that recommendation? Councillor Noonan. Is there a seconder? Councillor Tarantroy. Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is the essentially the same item that we've just revoked. So we had passed it back in back in November of last year. The only difference is the change in traffic volume. Looking at the maximum of 94 vehicle movements, so that's 94 in, 94 out as a maximum per day. I just read the last part of the of H as well. In fact, I'll read all of H. In relation to truck movements on Jules Road, the numbers are limited to a maximum of 94, which is the 78 plus 20% truck movements to and from the site per day, unless otherwise agreed in writing by the Chief Executive Officer. Upon completion of the internal haul road and crossover to Hasty Road, no truck movements for transporting the extracted material are permitted on Jules Road other than for direct local deliveries. So what we're actually looking at is really it's a relatively short-term problem or situation when the bore continues through and all of the road changes, the openings and closings and Hasty's cut off and the new ingress and egress for the quarry is moved to Hasty and then going out to the bore. This won't be an issue. So I think that there is no doubt, in particular with the bore, the length of it and the amount of material that's being used, there more than likely will be days when 70 trucks or 78 trucks just won't be enough, and there will be days when that they'll probably get up close to the 94, I would imagine, and I think that the community understands that. I think that regardless of your views on the actual location of the bore, or the fact that it might be burying $685 million worth of basalt, and the wisdom of that decision by the state government, regardless of your position on any of that, I think that we have to be mindful that this is a vital piece of infrastructure that has to happen, that is going to happen, and that it is a short-term period of inconvenience, but that in the long run, ultimately, it will provide much better transport and that this particular issue with the truck movements in and out of the quarry and the amount of, or the volume of traffic on Jules Road will be minimised, and I think that that's actually a good thing. So I'd commend the motion to the councillors.
Councillor Tarrant-Roy.
Thank you. I think it's really important with this item to make it clear that it's only in relation to condition H. So basically the recommendation reflects the factors previously considered supportable apart from the truck volume limit, and is as consistent with the approval dated on the 30th of November, as Councillor Noonan said. By virtue of rewording condition H, the proposal is not resulting in any further detrimental impacts to the locality's amenity, given that the site previously operated with an unlimited number of truck movements per day without any recorded complaints. Now, the applicant has provided adequate justification that the condition is too restrictive and does not enable a response to any possible fluctuations in the operator's demand. This recommendation solely assesses and reviews the wording of condition H in isolation to that of the remainder of the approval recently determined to Council in November 2022. Now that is from the summary, and I think that is the important thing. This is only in relation to condition H, so it's really clear to the community what it's about. Thank you.
Are there any speakers against the motion? Councillor Andrew?
I have a question as well. I hate terms like short term. It's ambiguous. When is the expected completion of the internal haul road and crossover to Hastings Road?
The Director of Infrastructure and Development.
Thanks for the question. My understanding is that this will happen almost simultaneously with the access onto the bore being completed, so that the internal road will then become available for direct use straight away.
So what, 2025, 2026?
So the bore, the estimated bore completion is 2025. When that happens between 24 and 25, I'm uncertain of, and obviously there's a lot of variables there, but as soon as that is available to the applicant, they will be utilising it.
So the comment, the comment that I've got in regards to the motion is there's been two things said several times which I don't think are correct, and I'm quoting from the attachment from back in November. So this is in regards to the unlimited truck movements that had previously been approved. The proposed delivery of return concrete will increase truck movements by 8 per week. The currently approved 70 trucks per day entering and leaving the site associated with the extractive industry is not proposed to change. So they didn't have unlimited truck movements. They were capped at 70. I would imagine that perhaps 70 is a reasonable number, and that's perhaps why there haven't been complaints about the number of truck movements. I'm not convinced that at 94 we aren't going to get complaints, and I'm not sure that you can unring a bell. So I don't support the officer's recommendation to increase to 94. And that's, I think, all I've got to say about that.
Is there a speaker for the motion? Speaker against? The Deputy President? Both at the same time.
I've lumped myself into the against category, but I haven't quite got that far with that decision yet. But I just have some concerns over the wording of clause H. I mean, it's so far in the discussion, and from what we've heard from the consultant, there's obviously been a large relay onto the fact that when the crossover to Hasty Road is complete, that there will be no need for those movements to occur on Jules Road because they'll have direct access to the bore. And I blame myself for this because it would have been a very good question to ask at the opportunity that I had. But we need to understand what the breakdown of the business operation is, because if 60% of what's coming out of that site is still local deliveries, then 60% of those trucks will still continue to use Jules Road. And so ultimately, if only 20% is actually going to the bore, 78 will still end up on Jules Road. And I think that's kind of, at the end of the day, what's allowed. Now, unless by crossover to Hastings, we're actually saying there's an ability for those trucks to jump onto Hastings and continue down to Bustle Highway, which is then another challenge. So I typically don't generally have an issue with these level of truck movements, particularly in an environment where it's a pre-existing licence and there hasn't been any complaints. The applicant, in that sense, sort of generally has a bit of a social licence as operating in the area, but I think there's huge ambiguity around are permitted on Jules Road other than for direct local deliveries. And direct local deliveries for me would under my impression, would be any delivery that isn't directly to the bore. So obviously, I'm sure they are delivering to the Outer Ring Road, Southern Gateway as it is now. That's the question I probably should have asked the consultant, so it leaves me a little bit in the grey, but at the same time we've also heard questions about operations obviously haven't been able to be answered at the time. So I'm in a bit of a grey area at the moment, I'll admit. I don't think I have a question for any of our officers at this stage, unless I'll put the question in the benefit that if it is known by staff that we may get an answer, but through the chair, do we have any idea what the breakdown is or percentage of those trucks movements that are to directly service the bore?
The Director of Infrastructure and Development.
Thanks for the question. I am currently looking through the attachment because I do believe that there is a breakdown in there. I'm just trying to locate it at this point in time, sorry. If you look at section 7.5.9 access and traffic, within the attachment 14.3, it has a percentage of total traffic along routes 1, 2 and 3 under the existing access arrangements, and in that it breaks down Southwest Highway via Lilydale, Bustle via Hasty and the interchange routes 1 and 2. Doesn't actually talk about Jules. Sorry, in the attachment 14.3.
Yep. Sorry, Seb.
Page 25.
296, am I on the right document?
26 on the actual docs on tab, 25 on the actual page number on the PDF.
No, I've just got maps. Or is it attachment 14.3.1?
Yes, yes it is, I'm sorry, it is, yes.
Oh, it's sorry, it's page 20, sorry.
So if I may, the local road heavy vehicle route network permits Tri-Drive 1 and oversized B double vehicles to travel on Hasties, Allenville, Lilydale Road and the southern section of Jules Road. Each day approximately 70 trucks both enter and exit the site via internal haul roads and also externally through the Bitchmires Quarry entrance before exiting to Jules Road. With the proposed heavy vehicle access from Hasties Road, the 70 entry and exiting truck movements will be transferred to the new access point via proposed internal haul road. The additional 1 daily truck movement associated with the transport of returned concrete as part of the proposed crushing and screening to occur on lot 348 will also occur via the proposed heavy vehicle access point from Hastings Road. So if 70 are entering and exiting, and that accounts for all 70 in the proposal in that paragraph. That's, I think, as best as I can do. But my understanding of this operation is that it will take almost all of the traffic into the new bore connection, but there will be some that will have to access through the other way. I can't give you a breakdown in percentage.
So a follow-up question then, with the access road and the crossover to Hastings, is it anticipated that trucks will still be able to use that crossover and access Bustle Highway through that service road?
The service road will be past the cul-de-sac that will be formed at the end of Hastings, so you can't turn right out of the quarry down Hastings Road. You'd have to come back around, is my understanding, and then turn right at Jules. It would be inefficient in order to do that. You can access Bustle Highway through the bore and then down the new road connecting to Centenary Ave in order to go north on Bustle Highway. So the only local traffic movement for trucks would be in that particular Jalora area between the new Centenary Road and what is currently Hastings Road connection. Otherwise, you would just use the bore.
So I'm more thinking around the period of construction when which this is, ultimately meant to be supplying to the project. While supplying to the project, in the way that it's worded in the crossover to Hastings Road, it's sort of implying that, are we talking about that as the interchange? We're referring to, when we say crossover to Hastings Road, are we referring to the bore interchange project, or are we referring to there will be a linkage to the end of Hastings Road during construction?
Construction of the bore?
Construction of the bore, yes.
No, it won't be in place until the bore is constructed. So once the bore's constructed, that crossover will then allow access to the bore. It is not for during construction.
Okay. See, that's for me, that's good to hear, because I am still in this period of understanding or was under the impression that we were talking a lot about the business supplying the construction. But if what you're saying is there's a direct access so that they can get onto the bore after completion for movement, well then obviously that's a great outcome for Hastings Road as it is, which is seeing 17%, not going into questions, but coming back into conversation, and there's 17% at the moment of traffic. So that would be an improvement. At the same time, and that would I would expect that would also eliminate the Southwest Highway via Lilydale Road route. That's number one, which is 56%. So ultimately, we should see. Ultimately, we should see about 74% of that going obviously through to the bore, which does significantly at the end of the day reduce the truck movements on Jules Road for other direct deliveries. Sorry to drop those questions on the team, but I was just trying to understand more around the breakdown, obviously, and I appreciate that. I'm still here, not so much in as grey of an area, but interested to hear what councillors' thoughts are as we go through discussion. Like I said, ultimately, for me, these sort of truck movements on a pre-existing site are not usually something to be of huge concern. I think taking off nearly 75% of those truck movements from Jules Road in the future obviously would be an improvement in the long term. With that, looking to hear debate, and will cast my vote when the time comes.
Are there any other speakers on the item? Question, Councillor Tarantroy?
Yeah, just a question. Through you, Chair, to Tanya Gillett. On page, what page am I on? On page 26, further down in table 7, Can you clarify that table 1 and 2 about once the outer ring road is complete, how it moves 100% of the movements, the route movements, the traffic along routes 1 and 2? Table 7 on page 26 of the same document you were looking at before.
Thanks for the question. So your question is about Table 7 and
Yep.
how those particular routes described there will then change once the bore is in operation? So that shows you the two routes, Northwest Highway via Bore and Buswell Highway via Bore. So both of them show 100% of total traffic along the Bore. So some going north, some
Thank
going
you.
south.
I've already spoken to the motion. That's why I asked you to answer that question for me. Thank you.
Are there any other speakers on the item? Councillor Mogg?
Thank you, Mr. President. Can I just have clarification from questions that Councillor Schiano asked? So the extra truck movement won't happen until after the 30th of November or after the Hastings Road new connection or the Bore connection is complete?
The Director of Infrastructure and Development.
Thanks, Councillor Mogg. They're two separate issues. The increase in truck movements and then where those truck movements occur. So there's been no discussion about the discussion around the increase in truck movements is one, but where they are travelling is where we're trying to get to as far as these tables are concerned. So they're related but not, they're two different issues, if you like. Does that answer your question? Not really. Can you rephrase?
So what they're requesting is the extra trucks, whether it be 70 truck movements, 90 truck movements. When will that happen, start in place?
So the option, if council accepts the resolution, the recommendations, the officer recommendation, it doesn't necessarily happen straight away. It happens on a project basis when the applicant requires extra than the current approval that they have. So it's not like tomorrow you'll wake up and there'll be 93 truck movements all of a sudden. They will be based on projects. So if the applicant tenders for a particular project and all of a sudden they need 90, and that starts in 2 weeks, it gives them the opportunity to go ahead, tender for that project, do all of their due diligence without having to come to the CEO for approval.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a couple of questions?
Councillor Andrew?
So what you've just said, Tanya, about that isn't how H reads. H reads as its open slather, and if we pass this tonight, as of tomorrow, they can have 94 truck movements going on that road tomorrow. Nowhere in H does it say that it's dependent upon providing other information or a final tick off from the CEO. That is open slather starting tomorrow.
The Director of Infrastructure and Development.
Councillor Andrew, that's true. However, in the presentation earlier, you heard that the increase will only be based on projects that they are tendering for. Yes, you can read it how you're reading it, but my understanding in the operation of the business is that it allows the flexibility should they apply for projects in the future.
And I just have a second question. None of the other roads, Hastings, Jules, none of them are being downgraded as their haulage category, are they? They're remaining as their current haulage category to take these size trucks. They aren't getting degraded down once the bore is established.
The Director of Infrastructure and Development.
There has been no mention of degrading any of the roads as far as their categorisation for heavy haulage to this end, but it possibly something that could be raised in the future. But right at this moment, no, you are correct.
Sorry. And there's nothing in here that actually stipulates that they have to move those trucks off those internal roads. They use ambiguous language like it's anticipated that that's what they'll use. They will, what's the other word? It's proposed that they'll use the bore rather than, and the new heavy vehicle access rather than Hastings Road, for example. So it's ambiguous. There's nothing that actually is going to make them no longer use those roads.
The Director of Infrastructure and Development.
I'm not sure of your question, Councillor. Is that a statement or...?
Are they restricted? Sorry. Will they be prevented from using the internal roads like Hastings and Jules rather than the bore once the internal haul road has been opened?
There will be no legal reason that they can't use those roads once they're open. However, there's a substantial amount of money being placed for access for this quarry to the bore to alleviate these traffic concerns in the community.
Are there any other speakers to the item? Question, Councillor Territory?
A question through the chair to Tanya Gillett. So when the bore is complete and they've got their slip road to access the site, will it be possible for them to get from Jules Road to their site? Or, yeah.
The Director of Infrastructure and Development.
Thanks, Councillor. It is not my understanding that the other crossover will be decommissioned because it will also be utilised for the light vehicles and stuff, etc. anyway. So the other crossover will remain. However, my understanding is that they will be separating trucks from their own light fleet.
Thank you.
Are there any other speakers to the item? Councillor Dillon?
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, while I sympathise with the needs of the operator, I am a bit like Councillor Andrew, a little bit concerned about the ambiguity of a lot of the wording of this. It does seem fairly rubbery. It does feel it doesn't state that they won't up the truck movements to 94 pretty much overnight. I would just probably caution my fellow councillors to maybe think about the fact that while we haven't had any complaints to this point in time with the current movement of trucks, that increasing it by 20% or the potential to increase those movements by 20% could tip the balance very much away from our residents. That's my major concern. Like I say, I do understand the operator needs to be flexible in the current environment, and we wish them well, but I don't want it getting too much in their favour and us looking away from our local residents and ratepayers.
Are there any further speakers or questions? Councillor Mogg?
Thank you, Mr. President. As a resident of Jallurup who's impacted on Hastings Road and an advocate and representative of those affected residents, I support them. We accept the industry that's there, acknowledge what goes on, but anything extra than what they already do, I will not support. And that's why I'd like to make amendment I don't know where to put in, but basically extra truck movements won't happen until that connection to the Bore or Hastings Road after the closure.
There probably need to be a little bit more context to that, because that would be inoperable against condition H if it was to remain as is. So you're saying you want them to keep them at their current level, which is 78, nothing further until that link road is constructed.
Correct, thank you.
So if I may, Councillor, I'll suggest to you that your amendment is in condition H, which is to omit certain words. So to a maximum following the, so remove that. Yep, I think the minute taker's onto what I'm suggesting.
Sorry, I can't read. Yeah.
So essentially it's just numbers are limited to a maximum of 78.
Yeah.
And you're not wishing for the Chief Executive Officer to have authority to vary that?
Correct.
Do you want that removed as well? Yeah. So now that would read, Councillor, in relation to truck movements on Jules Road, numbers are limited to a maximum of 78 truck movements to and from the site per day. That's it. Yep. We'll just...
Sorry, can you read that out again?
So that condition H, which is Q on the board. Yeah, just because it's... So that now reads, in relation to truck movements on Jules Road, numbers are limited to a maximum of 78 truck movements to and from the site per day. Upon completion of the internal haul road and crossover to Hastings Road, no truck movements for transporting the extracted material are permitted on Jules Road other than for direct local deliveries. Are you also wishing to limit the applicant to 78 truck movements upon completion of that haulage road as well? Because that would read as that as well. So once they have the internal haulage road directly onto the ring road bill.
No, they can have extra once the connection to the Bore is made and the Hastings Road is cul-de-sac.
All right, so we need to add that into your...
Yeah. Yes.
Yep. Is that the intention of your motion, Councillor? Would you like me to read it?
Yes, please.
So now it would read, in relation to truck movements on Jules Roads, numbers are limited to a maximum of 78 truck movements to and from the site per day. Maximum number of 94 truck movements per day are allowed upon the completion of the internal haul road and crossover to Hastings Road, noting no truck movements for transporting the extracted material are permitted on Jules Road other than for direct local deliveries.
Yes, thank you so much.
Sorry, technically, no, Councillor. As the seconder?
Yes.
Yep. Do you wish to second the motion, Councillor? Yep. All right, so Councillor Andrew seconding.
So I feel like it would read cleaner if there's a full stop after day, and then it's a new sentence of a maximum number of 94 truck movements per day.
Oh, up on the second line.
So
Yep.
up in the second line, rather than it all running
Sure.
Yeah.
All right. That's seconded. So does the mover wish to speak?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Because it's not only just from this industry, but the community is affected by Hastings Road being currently a designated truck haulage route. So there's that thought as well. So the extra truck haul usage is just frightening for the community. So I thank you for the amendment and help with that. And just to clarify that the community accept Wholesome, the quarry's there, what it does, and we're impacted by that. So it's good to work together, but just anything extra that's already happening is just impacting the community and the residents that are in close proximity. So thank you.
Councillor Andrew.
Thank you. I much prefer this to what was originally proposed tonight. However, I do have one small concern that we haven't allowed for the CEO to approve the 20% increase. I'm mindful of us ending up at SAT, and I am mindful that that then does put onto Wholesome a more onerous position of them technically, I would assume, having to come back to us. Is that a correct assumption through the chair to the CEO, that if they sought to increase those 78 truck movements, that they would actually now have to come back and request a variation through council?
Correct. Yep.
Oh, yep. And so I say maybe we should consider putting the 20% back in there with the approval of the CEO, whether or not we want to tighten that up, and that technically it needs to come not officially through us, but for it to, you know, I've received this request, what do you think? But I do think maybe we should, in the grand scheme of things, because this is more onerous than what we gave them in November.
You've both spoken to it now, so we can't change it. You'll have to discuss and debate this amendment. If you wish to change it again, it'll have to be passed and then amended again, or fail and something else proposed. All right. Question, Councillor Sciano? Is it? Or
Well, I'll make a contribution, but if I can ask a
Yeah, sure.
question first.
Yep.
To you, Mr. President, I have a vague recollection that we have a delegation that allows the CEO to provide a certain number of additional truck movements. Now, I may have just been dreaming about that, as I often dream about delegations to the CEO and what they could be. But I for the life of me, I could have thought that we had a delegation, and I wonder, the follow-up question would be, if we did have a delegation, would it have really only just been a matter of best practice to have included that in the clause, but when realistically the CEO may already have the authority to the agreed amount to make variations to truck movements? Give you a moment to answer that, and then I could make a contribution.
we'll just double check that delegations register. Yeah, if you wish to speak, Councillor, might do that while we wait for the answer to that question.
Yeah, just give a moment, and I apologise if, starting off from that question, which obviously the CEO is running through that delegation register, I may also be mistaking in my memory that quite often we use the terminology delegate to the CEO authority to approve additional truck movements, which is often a clause that we have in most of our items. I just really want to zoom out a bit here because I feel like we're always given a raw deal to the people of Jalora, it seems. But I just want to put into perspective, and this is what we just talked about before the amendment, around page 25 of the attachments. Only 17% of the truck movements go through Jalora. So there is about 13 trucks a day currently, or what was in the original proposal, that are actually going through Jalora, because 56% of them are pulling out onto Lilydale Road and heading out to South Western Highway. So the people who are really affected are actually the people of North Boy and up, right, who could see half a dozen increase. But as for how we've drawn into this discussion around the trucks on the road in Jalora, I think that is being blown. It's just my opinion. I think that is being blown a little bit out of perspective. I think this breakdown is very beneficial, but 17% of 76 is only 13. So even with an increase to 94, if we saw this same sort of split, we're only going to see about 15 or so truck movements a day on Hastings Road. Now, of course, and I recognise what Councillor Mogg has said time and time again, there are other industries using that road, and I know there are plenty of trucks that go through Jalora, but we can't knock one applicant back because there's other trucks on the road. That's not a fair situation at all. But 17%, it's their lowest use route after their interchange between Route 1 and 2, which is South Western Highway via Bunbury Outer Ring Road, northbound and southbound, 56% on Lilydale Road. So just want to put that in perspective, and just if we perhaps had an answer on my question from earlier.
Yes, the CEO has delegations only regarding extractive industry licence fees. The individual delegation is made per application as to whether the CEO has the authority to vary the number of truck movements. Sorry, apologies for sending the CEO on the wild goose chase through our delegations register. Thank you for the answer. On that note, I will stop speaking. Are there any other speakers to the amendment? Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I'd like to congratulate Councillor Shiano for doing the numbers using tables 6 and 7 of the attachment. I actually got 94 movements minus 78 movements equaling 16 truck movements, and if 56% of them are going out via Lilydale to the Southwest Highway, 50% of 16 is 8 additional. We're talking about 8 additional truck movements per day going out to Lilydale, which even if every additional truck went via Hasty, we're looking at 8 trucks, 8 additional movements. I think, and so really it's 1 additional truck movement per hour onto Hasty. Okay, I drive that particular route twice a day every weekday during the school term. Every day I see people on the footpaths, walking the dog, jogging, pushing the pram. There's a good footpath on both Hasty and the new work that was put on Jules. I often do pass trucks on that haulage route, and I've always been impressed with the courtesy that they demonstrate. I think Wholesom's been a good community member, and I think that they probably impress that upon their truck drivers, that, you know, we're here as a member of the community, and we want you to show respect for that community and make our lives easier by driving sensibly and slowly, and you know, not excessively braking and all of that sort of stuff, which they do, which trucks can do. So I think that the residents living along Jules, who would be most affected, because that's that short section of Jules, that southern end of Jules, where all the trucks come out. I think that they are probably looking forward to the day when Hasty does get cul-de-saced, and when the new crossover is built on the eastern end of Hasty, and that probably can't come soon enough. I'd like to congratulate the state government, the Minister, Don Punch, Charles Jenkinson from Infrastructure Australia, and other members of the Jullorp community who advocated so effectively and forcefully to have Hasty, to have that main connection route to the bore moved from Hasty, away from Hasty, because Hasty really is the main street of Jullorp. And I think all of the Jullorp community is looking forward to the day when that becomes more like a main street, so a quieter thoroughfare where, you know, I think that will be a very good thing for the Jullorp community. That main access route has been moved up to Centenary. There are not as many residents in such close proximity on Centenary, and, you know, so I think that's not a bad thing. I think that's a good thing. I think that people in Jullorp, my impression is that people are looking forward to the day when the bore's completed, that it will provide better access, you know, for people from Bustleton and people from down south and people up north to get to wherever they want. But it will actually end up making Jullorp a quieter, in some respects, by taking traffic off Bustle Highway and moving it to the east of the suburb. It will actually make a larger proportion of Jullorp actually quieter by moving traffic, and given the prevailing winds, the noise from Bustle Highway has a bigger impact currently on residents in Jullorp than it will do once the main thoroughfare is on the bore. I still feel for those people in the southern end of Jullorp who will be cut off, well, not cut off because they'll have the Yalinda Road Bridge. So my feelings is that I don't support this amendment. I would hope that it fails. I think that we should go back to the original motion as put, and that's what I'll be advocating and voting for. Thank you.
Are there any other speakers to the amendment? Councillor Tarantroy?
I'm wondering if, when the ball goes through, if this motion or amendment fails, whether it's worth putting in a full stop after Jules Road and then saying Jules Road only should be used by light vehicles and local delivery drivers. That way, heavy haulage trucks can't, via a loophole, continue to use Jules Road to take haulage through. So, but I can't amend an amendment. We have to vote on this and then we have to do that amendment. Yep, is that correct? Okay, thank you.
Are there any other speakers for the amendment? Councillor Dillon.
Might as well throw in my 20 cents worth, thanks, Mr. President. Look, I'm of a similar belief, even though I think hearing some clarification about the truck movements and how they're spread out around the Jalorup Road network, maybe it isn't as bad. While I sympathise with any people in the area who aren't thrilled about it, maybe it isn't going to be quite as catastrophic as you might first think. Probably agree with what Councillor Noonan said on that level. I'd be particularly concerned if there wasn't some scope for a delegation from the CEO to tweak truck movements. Like Councillor Andrews said, I don't want to see this end up at SAT, and I think this amendment is going to be too restrictive, and I can see it being problematic down the track. Councillor Andrew did talk about unringing a bell. I think while we don't want to revisit this type of motion again and again and again, we probably, if things don't go according to plan, we probably could revisit it again. But I think this amendment as presented, while I respect Councillor Mogg's view, I think it's probably too restrictive and I see it being problematic down the track.
Yes, Councillor.
If Wholesome did increase truck movements to 94 tomorrow, and in 3 months' time we've got 15 complaints, are we able to bring it back to reduce it back down, or are we stuck with our decision?
I believe we would be beholden to the decision. We wouldn't be able to change it without... I don't think we could revoke it and change it again. You'd have to go through a SAT. Sure, unless there were infringements or breaches of regulation. Does that answer your question, Councillor? Yep. Are there anything further on that amendment? Does the mover wish to close? I'll put that amendment to the vote. Those in favour? And those against? And that amendment is lost 5-2. So we return to the substantive item. Everyone has spoken on it except for myself. Look, I've been throwing a little bit around on this item this evening. I really do understand the issues raised by fellow councillors on both sides. You know, yeah, I agree it's only a couple more trucks, I suppose, that are going east or west. You know, 8 trucks over a day, it's probably not much. But then again, it's a 20% increase, potentially, to that maximum limit, and could even go a little bit further than that if that variation is exercised by the Chief Executive Officer. And I look at it in the context of what's actually happening around Jalorup at the moment. There is the largest infrastructure project happening right on its doorstep. There's significant roadworks happening in that area. So looking at it from that angle, I'm sort of wondering if the network could actually handle that extra truckload just with everything that's going on in that area. So I wasn't supportive of the amendment, and I can't say I'm entirely supportive of the officer's recommendation, but then again, I won't stand in the way of it. But what I'd actually like to do is move an amendment. Just listening to the concerns of fellow councillors, I think I can see where some of the arguments are coming from. So I'd like to move the following amendment to condition H. So it's largely the same. So that was the amendment from Councillor Mogg. So reduced to a maximum of 78. Trims on the side per day, yeah, full stop. And then otherwise is the first. Oh, yeah, it doesn't matter if it's unless or otherwise is the first word. Yeah, unless otherwise agreed to in writing by the Chief Executive Officer to a variation of a maximum of 30%. So sorry? Yep. Is there a seconder for that? Otherwise, we can change that to a maximum of 20. All right. Right, now that that's seconded, look, I was prepared to go to 30 because that gets them the 94 they're seeking if they need, plus there's that little bit of wiggle room with the consent of the Chief Executive Officer, subject to condition, obviously, to allow for that market growth. But sensing the mood of the room, I'm happy for 20%. Look, I note the concerns from the operator and the consultants regarding requiring the consent of the Chief Executive Officer for that additional truck movements to have to come and talk to the council. However, when we had the original item come to us in November, that was discussed between the council, the executive and the applicant at the time, and it didn't seem to be an issue. And I can understand, you know, and I want the local government to be a responsive organisation and not be an impediment to business of any kind. But, you know, and I've had the confirmation from the CEO that even if you were tendering, which, as Councillor Andrew has also pointed out, is multiple week process, the local government can provide in principle support before providing that formal support if they were to receive that tender. So I don't see it as an impediment. You know, and if things were suddenly, you know, the operator needed that approval, the local government can turn around pretty quick when it needs to. I'm sure with a quick phone call and an email directly to the CEO, it would be dealt with pretty quickly. So, and I also just, I draw the attention to the letter that was provided by the proponent. The comment they make in there, referencing these truck movements, is around the 78 track. We expect that most of the time operations for truck traffic would be much less than this. However, numbers were to exceed 78 movements to and from the site per day on a very infrequent occasion. So I don't think this is going to happen entirely too often, based on the wording that has actually come from the letter headed by Aldering and Associates. So I'm not seeing it as an impediment. I think we've been pretty flexible here. I think that's all I've got to say on it. So, just a second to wish to speak.
I concur with everything that Councillor Kitchen has said. I was very surprised to hear that it was such an impediment to the business that you had to call or email the CEO. Your answers to my questions earlier didn't instill me with a lot of confidence. And the two things combined, to be honest, makes me think that Wholesome has an ulterior motive in wanting the 94 cap effective immediately, especially in light of that letter that Councillor Kitchen read out, and in the development application that was originally provided by Wholesome back in November, in which you only wanted 70. So I'm happy to put it back to where it was at the beginning of where we were in November. I'm just a little bit, I guess, disappointed that we've spent so much time tonight to get back to where we were to begin with. And that annoys me. So that's it.
Is there anyone to speak against the amendment? Is there any speakers for or against the amendment? Councillor Terrantroy.
Look, I think this is a good result for the community of Jallurup and also for Wholesome, because they can still apply for a 20% increase, which can come back to council on the 78 truck movements, sorry. So yeah, and I've just reread that second line, or that last line, sorry, and we really don't need to put a full stop there and then include light vehicles, because it's actually already says there, internal, it says that once the, upon completion of the internal haul road and crossover to Hastings Road, no truck movements for transporting extracted materials are permitted on Jules Road, other than direct local deliveries. So I don't feel the need now for the full stop and then to stipulate that only light vehicles and delivery vehicles on that road on Jules. Sorry, thank you.
Is there any further discussion on that amendment? I don't wish to close, so I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? That amendment is carried unanimous. That becomes part of the substantive motion, which we return to. All members have spoken on that item, so unless there's a desire to suspend standing orders for further discussion. Yeah, we'll just make sure we've got that up on the board so everyone is completely confident of what we're voting on. I'll just allow them a couple of seconds for the minute taker. I'm not seeing any desire for any further discussion, so I'll return to the mover. Does the mover wish to close?
Question, if I may, through the chair. Does it matter, or would it read better if, rather than a full stop after sites per day, if it was a comma or a semicolon before unless?
Yeah, sorry, you're the closing speaker. It can't be changed now. You can only sum up debate.
Right.
Before
Yes.
it gets put to
yeah.
the
Okay. Well,
yeah.
I'm happy. I'm happy with that, so long as the CEO and so long as it's not too late to make a grammatical improvement, or so long as the meaning of the wording is clear enough.
I believe so.
We're all good? Yeah, okay, I'm happy to, leave it at that.
All right, I'll put that item to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? And that's carried 5-2. All right, I know what you're about to ask. It being 10 minutes past 8, I'll adjourn the meeting for 10 minutes. We will reconvene at 8:20 p.m. All right, it being 8:21, I'll reconvene the council meeting.
Hold on. Apologies. The Shire President has left the room for a proximity interest, and so will Councillor Dillon. The item is 14.4, and I have two conflicts of interest in front of me. I have one from Councillor Kitchen, 14 Program of Works, is proximity interest, and I have another from Councillor Dillon, 14.4 Program of Works Roads, and that is also a proximity interest. And pursuant to those two, section 5.60B, they have been required to leave the room. For those following at home and maybe using an older agenda, the agenda was republished with the amended officer's recommendation, and that recommendation is that the council, 1, endorses the Program of Works Roads 2023-24 as per attachment 14.4.1, 2, endorses an amount of $4,518,529 for the proposed 23-24 Program of Works to the draft annual budget, which includes a provision of $1,071,115 for roads projects carried forward from financial year 2022-2023, and 3, endorses $500,000 to be transferred to a reserve within the 2023-24 draft annual budget for further allocation being available to the roads program subject to council approval for use at this time. Do I have a mover? Councillor Terran-Troy. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Mogg. Councillor Terran-Troy, would you wish to speak?
No, I'm very confident with this one. Moved as read.
Councillor Mogg.
Thank you, Deputy President. I concur with Councillor Terran-Troy. It basically approved as read and support this highly. Any roadworks is a great addition to the Shire. Thank you.
Is there any speakers against the item? Do I have any members, councillors who wish to speak? No? Councillor Andrew, do you wish to speak? Yep, question?
Yep. I can't find the email, but can I just confirm that out of that Peppermint Grove Beach school bus turnaround, only about $20,000 of that is coming out of our budget. The rest is the untimed grant funding. Is that my understanding?
I'll refer that question to the Director of Infrastructure and Development.
Thanks, Councillor Andrew. That is fully funded through LRCI funding, and there was $18,000 committed from Shire Muni for the bus shelter and that and associated landscape works for that project. Those parts haven't been completed yet and will be carried forward for completion next financial year. But as far as the LRCI grant funding goes, that part has all been completed.
Any more questions?
And just a second question regarding Jules Road and the fact that it's the part to Wholesome. How much of that 140,000, or if any of it, is coming out of the road bond or is being paid for by the road bond that's paid by Wholesome?
I'll refer your question to the Director of Infrastructure and Development.
The monies put forward for the program are looking at Muni works or Muni funding only at this point in time. There hasn't been any direct transfer of monies from that to Jules, but we can certainly look at that going forward. This is purely just to get the program up and running, and then we'll do the detail as part of that planning into next year.
You're finished, Councillor? You're all right. Final call. Is there anyone who wishes to contribute to debate? No. Does the mover wish to have the right of reply? Councillor Terran-Troy? No. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. We will welcome Councillor Kitchen back to the chair. I believe Councillor Dillon has a proximity interest in the following item, so he will remain out of the room.
All right, we move on to item 14.5, the Programme of Works 2023 to 2024, Paths and Trails. Councillor Dillon has declared a proximity interest in the item and has left the room. So, is there a mover for that recommendation? Councillor Andrew. Is there a seconder? Councillor Mogg. Councillor Andrew.
Thank you. I'll move this as read. I very much enjoy seeing the program of works for our paths and trails. I understand that we all need roads and drainage and that kind of stuff, but that stuff's a bit boring, and I don't really feel like that really kind of value adds to our communities. Not in the same way that the paths and trails do. It makes our communities more accessible, it makes them safer, and so I like when this program of works comes around.
Councillor Mogg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I also get excited when this comes to council and involved with trails work at the Iron Gullies Falls, and understand the health and well-being it provides for people in our community and tourism, physical, mental and safety. So I highly support. Thank you.
Are there any other speakers to the item? Councillor Terran-Troy.
I just want to add further, yes, this is exciting and it's something that the community wants, but I'm also wanted to point out that with increasing costs of resources, we need to do this now, sooner rather than later, because prices are only going to go up. So yeah, basically the program of works and paths and trails for 2023-24, I think it's a wonderful thing, and I hope everyone votes for it. Thank you.
Are there any other speakers on the item? Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to endorse the comments of all of the previous councillors. I'd in fact like to see an even more ambitious program of works with parks and trails, and I'm hoping that things will come back to either us or a future council where some of that $500,000 from the roads that's not specifically allocated might even be moved to parks, to paths and trails. I note the previous decision from the council in December 2018, when the council endorsed the principles of the Bunbury-Wellington 2050 cycling strategy. We had a meeting just this afternoon of the Climate Change and Adaptation Committee, and one of the points that was made there was, how do we reduce our emissions and all of that sort of stuff? How do we reduce the environmental impact? And one very clear and obvious way is to increase the number of people on bicycles, and we have a relatively flat shire. It's easy to ride. We just need safe places to ride, and the sooner we can get people off Bustle Highway and make a safe access, safe cycle link from Bustleton to Capel to Bunbury, that will be an enormously popular route, I believe, not just for day-to-day commuters, but as a tourist venture. And so I would certainly like to see, and I note as well that we've got a report that's recently been done looking at the feasibility and routes. So I'm looking forward to seeing that report. But I think the sooner that we can get onto this, the better. We need to. This is really a direction that I would hope that the council would endorse and emphasise to the state government and the federal government that we would like funding for this, because we fundamentally want to change the way people traverse this shire, and I think that would be a great thing. Thank you.
Are there any other speakers? No. Does the mover wish to close? I'll put that item to the vote. Those in favour? And that's carried unanimous. We'll just wait for Councillor Dillon to return to the room. We now move on to item 14.6, the Programme of Works 2023-24 Drainage. I would like to move that item. Is there a seconder? Councillor Dillon. Well, for the first time in, 19 months of being President, I've decided to move an item because Councillor Andrew might like paths and roads, but drainage is my favourite thing. So I thought, you know what, I'll have a crack. Our drain work, I like to think of it as the undiscovered country. The undiscovered country. It is the most vital and most important part of our asset infrastructure portfolio, and yet we know very little about it. Whether it's the discoveries in Peppermint Grove Beach that we had an aging bit of infrastructure and pipes not glued together there, or Boyne Up where we had a drain passing through a residential area that was causing a few houses to sink. There's always something exciting in our drainage network. But no, all jokes aside, it is very critical because without it, our roads don't hold up, our paths don't hold up. And most of the Shire is a flood and swamp plain, so we do need a drainage network that does work. So very happy to see this happen. A bit like all of our programs, it could do with a little bit more money, a little bit more resource, but it's a local government. We've got to prioritise, and as always, we are got to make sure we're spending our money wisely. So yeah, it's a little bit along the way, and be happy to see what we find when we pick up a rock this time, and see what condition another area of the asset's in. But quite happy to endorse this, and so I'll pass on to the seconder to have a conversation about it and hopefully make it so. Councillor Dillon.
Thank you, Mr. President. May I concur with your enthusiasm about our drainage network. As a fellow who was born and bred in the Shire, there's not much of our drainage network I haven't waded along. And some of it needs upgrading, some of it needs a bit of a clean out. We need to get rid of a few of the yanyips in spots. I too am passionate about drainage. I'm sure most of our residents would also be passionate about not blowing bubbles every winter. So I concur with you, Mr. President, and endorse the Programme of Works 23-24 Drainage to my fellow councillors.
Are there any speakers against that item? Speakers for? Councillor Terrantroy.
I just wanted to say what a pleasure it is to see you, Doug, move a motion, so that's fantastic. And yeah, I'm concerned about drainage as well, because I come from Queensland, where torrential rain, if you got the rain we got in Queensland, Yeah, you'd be in real trouble in the Shire of Capel, except you've got a soil base. We have a clay base up there, so a bit different. But anyway, yes, it is a critical network of drains, and it does affect all buildings, roads, infrastructure, and yes, as Councillor Dillon said, prevents people from blowing bubbles every winter. Yeah, thank you.
Are there any other speakers for the item? No, I don't need to close. I'll put that on to the vote. Those in favour? And that's carried unanimous. Now move on to Community and Corporate Reports 15.1, Community Budget Requests for the 2023-24 financial year. Councillor Tarantroy has declared a impartiality interest in this item. Is there a mover? Councillor Mogg. Is there a seconder? Councillor Sciano. Councillor Mogg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I accept the motion as read. Thank you.
Councillor Sciano.
Thank you, Mr. President. I guess just to outline, I think probably one of the stronger rounds of community budget requests I've seen in my nearly 8 years on council. I've seen sometimes we've got none, sometimes we've not really been able to do anything, but this is a really good cross-section of the community. I was thinking a little bit about the toy library in the Jalorup Community Centre and thinking that seems more like a minor community grant type project, but at the same time, we often wouldn't really allocate a fund that large through that program as well. So I'm kind of glad that that's come through the community budget requests. As for the one item that was not supported in staff's recommendation, which is the toilet and shower block, I don't think it's necessarily a sign that we don't support that. I think just a project of that scale at over $100,000 or $121,000 estimated, that's something that needs to ultimately be going into our forward plans, our programs of works, and needs to be considered as part of a greater plan. So I think from my belief is from council, there's no ill feeling towards a particular project like that, but I think that process can't necessarily play out in this particular format through the community budget requests. But I mean, otherwise, the work for the LED floodlight upgrade at the Capel Country Club, the toy library in Jalorup, and obviously the requested replacement of some fountain and rehydration stations in Central Lakes Park is important. I wonder if for $8,000 we shouldn't have popped that up a tiny bit and put a dog bowl attached to it somewhere as well. Unless, in my head, they may literally be just not too far away from each other, but not going to move an amendment on that, but just something to consider. But yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I commend the item to council. It's great to see the community engaging with our budget process, and it's always exciting and a great opportunity to be here as a councillor and to be approving 3 community-led projects.
Are there any other speakers on the item? Councillor Tarantroy.
Just a question before I speak, because I read this last week, but I'm asking through the chair, Tanya Gillett, the rehydration station at the replacement, it does have a doggy bowl at the bottom, doesn't it? Is it the same as the one at Bibberloop?
The Director of Infrastructure and Development.
Yep.
Thanks for the question. You're talking about this one here in this
Yes.
item? I understand it doesn't. We'll have to check that. We'll take that on notice, councillor.
Thank you. Yeah, now to speak to the motion. I'm pretty sure it does have one, because I thought that was the photo that I saw. Same as the one at Bibberloop. It's great to see, the country Capel, the country club get the floodlights, and it's great to see the toy library in Jalorup, and it's great to see the replacement of something that everyone uses at Central Lakes in Dalyellup. So thank you.
Just to answer your question a bit further, Councillor, on the dog bowl, it does contain a tap for filling a dog bowl. Are there any other speakers on the item? No. Councillor Mogg, do you wish to close? No. I'll put that item to the vote. Those in favour? And that's carried unanimous. 15.2, the Community Sport and Recreational Facilities Fund, Small Grants Round, Capel Bowls Club Middle Shelter Project. Is there a mover for that? Councillor Mogg. A seconder? Councillor Dillon. Councillor Mogg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm just pleased to see that the club applied for this fund, and hopefully council will approve it. It's a great addition for the club. That's a very prosperous one. Thank you.
Councillor Dillon.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, I'd like to congratulate the Capel Bowls Club. Wonderful club, lots of friendly people. The councillors enjoyed some glow bowls for our Christmas function last year. I'm sure the Middle Shelter Project will be well received by members and the public alike.
Are there any other speakers on that item? Does the mover wish to close? I'll put that item to the vote. Those in favour? And that's carried unanimous. Item 15.3, the Department of Local Government, Sport and Cultural Industries Club Nightlights Grant Applications. There has been an update to the officer's recommendation. Just double checking. So in point 1, the amount has changed to 65,325. And then in point 5, the amount has changed from $146,000 to $195,977.10. Everyone got that? All right. Is there a mover for that? Councillor Mogg? Is there a seconder? Councillor Sciano. Councillor Mogg.
Thank you, Mr. President. Like this motion, the previous couple, any amendments to our community sporting groups to help them prosper in what they do is highly recommended and supported. Thank you.
The Deputy President.
Thank you, Mr. President. It may be hard to believe, but I've not played many physical sports in which I've needed to ever use a field with floodlights, but I'm sure know they're pretty important to the community. Look, I just simply, I know the staff or the team at the Shire have worked incredibly hard on these sports and recreation areas and ensuring that we are leading or sometimes just up to standard or getting ahead of the curve, the ball when it comes to our sports and recreation spaces. I mean, it's as simple as well planned and needed by the municipality, I think, at the end of the day. Now obviously, this is a great grant program as well. I admit that the change to the dollar figure in 5 was a bit of a shock to me, and that does significantly alter the outcome in the draft budget. I mean, we've also seen the item that we have later tonight around our mid-year budget review, of course, but there was I think ultimately that's it. I think this has come a long way. I think councillors have been well involved in this process with floodlights. You know, we do actually have to keep our sports and recreation areas up to a standard with League, and I think we saw a couple of years ago, it may have been Donnybrook or somewhere else there, one of their sites was deemed unusable for a particular league, and it was actually Boynup who filled the gap from memory. Some may remember there was a certain radio host, not Councillor Dillon at the time, who actually ended up focusing on the Boynup Football Club because they were they were the club that he went to after they closed down, and they sort of followed the league through the season on the local commercial radio. But it does happen. You may think that it's all right, the lights will keep turning on, and then all of a sudden the AFL or someone comes to you and says, no, you're not allowed to have your local Auskick team on that field. I mean, you imagine trying to tell the kids of Boyanup that they can't do Auskick on their local footy field. The grass still looks the same to them on a Sunday afternoon. No idea what's going on. So very well planned and needed.
Are there any other speakers to that item? Councillor Noonan?
Just a question, if I may.
Yep.
Through the chair. Will the extra lighting at the Boyanup Memorial Park Football Oval, will that also shed more light on the car park area?
The Director of Community and Corporate.
I'd have to take that question on notice, I think. From the plans, it's not clear on the plans that it does have that reach. I suppose it's something that can be considered during the installation. If we could go out and view the site and deem that if it is required on the car parking area, to see if there's a possibility, because obviously it has to be set up, and there's certain processes for that to happen. But in terms of giving you a definitive answer now, I'd have to take that on notice.
So just the context of your question, I suppose that's based on discussions from the community about wanting increased lighting levels in that car park area?
Yes, at a previous Boyanup Progress Association meeting that I attended, the car park between the Bowls Club and the AFL Oval was brought up, and the fact that it's at night can be if there's not on a dark night, it can be quite difficult to navigate, and that it would be good if there was an improved lighting.
The
there.
Chief Executive Officer.
Through Shire President, the LED lighting, the late change to the amounts actually was based upon some fairly recently received information from the contractor that in order to achieve the desired lighting level with the new LED light fittings, the poles needed to be increased from 24 metres high to 30 metres high, hence the 24 metre poles. 24 metre poles had to be replaced with 30 metre poles, hence the change to the budget and the recommendation. The LED lights are incredibly effective at putting the light exactly where it's meant to be and minimising light spill, i.e. sending it in places where it's not meant to go. What the 30 metre pole, however, will allow for us to consider at a future date is effectively putting another light fitting on the back, so one that faces away from the oval and potentially towards the car park. So that's certainly something that we can look at and consider as a future budget provision.
Yep, you have the call, Councillor.
Yep. Thanks, Mr. President. Very happy memories as a child running around over in Narrogin, freezing cold winters, playing football under the floodlights, and I'd certainly support this proposal, and look forward to getting out and maybe having a kick with Councillor Ciano.
Are there any other speakers? Councillor Andrew.
I actually have a couple of questions. So we've got the two figures in relation to the Boyanup Memorial Park AFL ground, the 65,000 and then the 195. There doesn't seem to be an actual breakdown of what the overall the funding that's available from the Department of Local Government, will that cover a third of both of these elements of the project, or will they only cover one element of the project?
The Chief Executive Officer.
Through you, Shire President, the eligibility under the nightlife program, I'm assuming you're talking, when you say two elements, you mean the poles and the lights, or the two separate proposals?
So I thought the 196,000 was the poles and the 65,000 was the lights.
No, the 195,000, councillor, is the total project, poles and lights.
Yep.
The 65,000 is the 1/3 grant application that we can submit to the CSRFF nightlife program. So 195,977 covers the entire project, poles and lights.
Yep.
That then increases the amount of money that we can, the 1/3 that we can apply for, which goes now from 48 to 65,000.
Okay.
Any further questions, Councillor? No. Are there any further speakers to the item? Councillor Mogg, do you wish to close? I'll put that item to the vote. Those in favour? That's carried unanimous. We now move to 15.4, the rates exemption agencies for South West Accommodation Inc. trading as Accord West. Is there a mover for that item? Councillor Noonan. Is there a seconder? Councillor Terrantroy. Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, I'd like to move this motion, move the officer's recommendation that a rates exemption on this particular property owned by the South West Accommodation Inc. trading as Accord West be granted. And the reason for it is because it provides a very important service, valuable service for the community, and I think that it's a small contribution that we can make as a shire, as a community, to help people who need that assistance in our community.
Councillor Terrantroy.
Just that this is a not-for-profit organisation which helps homeless kids, teenagers and the like, and I think that this is one way we can support them in doing what they're doing for our community and for our kids who find themselves nowhere safe to live. Thank you.
Are there any other speakers on the item? Councillor Andrew.
Thank you. Places like Accord West provide accommodation that does fill a market, fill a need, in our community, similar to what we were discussing much earlier tonight regarding low income and affordable housing to people that need it. We probably need more of it. The entire country probably needs more of it, and I couldn't be more supportive of providing this assistance to them, and I think it really is just a small way that we can support their good work.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Noonan, do you wish to close? I'll put that item to the vote. Those in favour? That's carried unanimous. 15.5, the 2022-23 mid-year budget review. Is there a mover for that item? Councillor Mogg. Is there a seconder? Councillor Dillon. Councillor Mogg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I accept the motion as read and would like to acknowledge our Shire staff for the entire work they do to put this together for us. Thank you.
Councillor Dillon.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Councillor Mogg. I also would like to thank, in particular, the author of this, Mr. Matt Aboney, for putting it together, and also Diane as well. our staff, especially in the financial part of the Shire, are certainly working overtime to keep an eye on all the pennies at the moment. Tough times in terms of prices going up and what have you, particularly for local governments. So I'd like to thank them for their hard work across the year and commend the mid-year budget review as presented. Thanks.
Are there any speakers against the item? Speakers for? Any speakers? No. The Deputy President.
Can I ask a question? This may be one perhaps for the CEO, but our Bunbury Geograph Economic Alliance membership for $13,500, which is not budgeted but as a part of this recommendation, can someone explain to me what we get for $13,500?
The Chief Executive Officer.
Excuse me, through you, Shire President. The Bunbury Geographic Economic Alliance, I guess, was, I'll talk around and then answer your question slightly, an organisation that came out of the Southwest CEOs Group and the Southwest Mayors and Presidents Group to try and drive some economic outcomes in particularly the Bunbury Geograph region. When I joined the organisation, we weren't a member of the Bunbury Geograph Economic Alliance. They were relatively new in their activities. So I guess we made the decision at that time to join to effectively try and answer the question that you've put. Is there value in being part of this organisation? It was next to impossible to judge that question not being part of the organisation. So effectively we made the decision to join the organisation to see whether or not there's value. I guess I'll be honest and say the jury's still out on whether or not we continue that membership. One of the advantages, I guess, that we have seen is that the Bunbury Geograph Economic Alliance has formed a strong relationship with JETSI within the state government and has a commitment from JETSI to deal with the kind of smaller, lower level business initiative ideas that drop below a certain threshold of size and quantum that would be handled at a state level by JETSI. So I guess it's very difficult to answer your question in that the organisation is very kind of young. Our involvement has only been now for probably 6 or 7 months. So we're still actually in the process of assessing that question.
Just, I can probably add a little bit more onto that. So originally the council decided in 2018 to not renew its membership of that group, which at the time was primarily focused on sister city partnerships, which the Shire of Capel didn't see a benefit in, and chose not to renew that membership. Since the Shire has been, as in through myself and the CEO, been engaging in this group again, largely voluntarily through the group. You know, myself, I meet with the other mayors and presidents of the Southwest that are in that group bi-monthly, and just a few weeks ago, something that's come out of that is we've had a discussion with the Federal Minister for Local Government, Minister McBains, through her office about how we could potentially bring a sort of city deal type agreement to the Southwest. Those are sort of the initiatives that are being discussed through at the moment. So the CEO's in right, yes, yeah, we're still sort of seeing the benefit of it, and sort of try not to debate the item without, whilst answering your question, yeah, it's provided more than what it used to.
That answered a lot of my supplementary questions as well, because I had a vague memory that we had jumped off the ship with the Bunbury Geograph Economic Alliance, and I think your recap of why we did that was very good. I remember those meetings with I think there was a change of CEO, and the new CEO was leading the sister city stuff, and ultimately I could not see any value in that, and I was very vocal at the time. I take confidence in yours and the CEO's, decision to, I guess, investigate that again. And if you are feeling that there is a huge value coming out of that, but I mean, I guess I'd put this out there as a warning, but in the 6 months that we've been members, I don't think that they've presented to council yet, or they haven't had any. So for 13.5 grand, I'm presuming that's for a 12-month fee. We haven't seen them in in the last 6 months. I'm not afraid to cancel these sort of memberships, as I have in the past, because we have to get value from them. There are multiple alliances out there. 13.5 grand is a pretty steep fee for a membership as well. I mean, we're talking a few grand. I think it might have been 10 grand when we kicked it in 2018. So I just want to put that out there. I'll be watching that very closely. I just have a second question about the projected surplus figures and the carry forward figure, and this is a question through the chair. The carry forward figure of 727,864, is that included in the calculation that provides us with the projected surplus of, I think, it's not right in front of me, I think it's 739,000. Is that included in that calculation?
Yes, basically. So all of that carry forward figure relates to unspent capital expenditure.
I just want to double check, because I think that really changes the not in a bad way at all, not a bad way, but I think it really changes that there isn't projects, and that number is a lot smaller than that, which also I think recognises the organisation's ability to run a budget, because you take that carry forward figure out, and the variation between the projected surplus and the original projected surplus and the mid-year reviews projected surplus, they're not very big numbers between, and that's a real recognition of the work that the organisation does, and I think we do as councillors to keep a budget on track. Carry forward projects with what we've got at the moment, and the struggle to get any workers to get projects done in time, and particularly at the exorbitant expenses that are blowing out on every project we have, they are unfortunately going to occur. And I think next year we're just going to be pushing more and more projects back, I think, unfortunately. But credit to the Shire team for running a budget that tight, but really important that we recognise that there is not money in the kitty. There is not money in the kitty at all. And maybe there's $13,500 we can find somewhere else when we get to that point. But I just want to make that point clear. Thank you.
Are there any other speakers on the item? Councillor Tarantroy?
I have a question. What does JETSI stand for?
Oh, you've got me now.
One of the mega
Yeah, there you go. Jobs, Technology, Science and Innovation. Yeah.
Thank you. I need a Bible of acronyms for council. Oh my gosh.
I like. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Andrew?
Thank you. I have a couple of questions as well. Councillor Sciano beat me to the punch regarding the question about the Bunbury Geographic Economic Alliance. Someone said that we stopped our membership back in 2018, so they can't be who I'm thinking of. There's another alliance that we were a member of that did the big tourism signs heading out to the Bunbury Marketplace.
The Chief Executive Officer.
Through you, Chair, Councillor, I think you're thinking about the Bunbury Geograph Tourism Partnership.
Possibly. So I thought originally that these were those people, but obviously they're not. So what's their actual terms of reference? What is the group's purpose? Because with all due respect, a bi-monthly meeting, you could do that with our neighbouring CEOs and presidents and the like on your own. We don't have to be paying $13,500 a year to be doing that. And I'm assuming that it's not costing $4,000 a meeting, $4,000 a meeting for you to attend. So what is the $13,500 actually going towards, and what is the Alliance's actual terms of reference? What are they trying to improve?
Sure. So the Bunbury Geographic Economic Alliance sits underneath the Bunbury Geographic Group of Councils. It comes out from them. So they have a board structure there which is made up of representatives from industry and local government. The Economic Alliance sort of says it in the name, it's to promote economic benefit for the southwest region in that Bunbury Geograph sort of region, so Capel, Bunbury, Harvey and Dardanup. I suppose I'm actually meeting with them tomorrow. We've recently gone down a path of trying to bring more federal investment in, and we've even sort of tried to discuss, and I have sort of raised it in the council here as well, about those 5 regional priorities, which would be a bit of a game changer. And the discussions around those sorts of things have been like the sale yards and the agribusiness precinct, the city's pushing that, the Amtrak, the Advanced Manufacturing Hub, those sorts of things. So it provides a resource, as in they've got their CEO and they've got a research officer, and then they've got access to the connections of the Bunbury Geograph group of councils, and then it's also another person who's talking to government. I suppose it depends how you take that benefit.
So they are essentially a state and federal government lobbying organisation. So they lobby state and federal governments on behalf of the Bunbury Geograph region for more funding to develop economic growth within our local communities. Is that accurate? Like what
They provide sort of a network for new industry establishment and connections and networking.
But industry can't access them directly though.
They can, yeah. There's industry representatives on the board.
But they have to pay their own membership fees?
Yes.
Right, so it's not just for any old man off the street. You've got to pay your registration fee. Right? That's
This is focused on local business and government initiatives in supporting that. Chamber does do it as well, has representatives and speaks.
Shire of Capel there.
Councillor President, millions of dollars worth of extra funding.
Councillor
President, millions of dollars worth of extra funding from state and federal grants, and the way they've done it is that Albany teamed up with its neighbouring shires. I think it was Denmark, Cranbrook, probably Plantagenet, I don't know. They were able to They were able to employ either 1 or 2 research officers, and their specific job was to find, shovel ready status, so that when the opportunity to fund that Dennis and the other Shire presidents had something to put on the table and say, how about giving us that? And Labor at the other level of government, because you play one off against the other, and that's why Albany and the Great Southern region has been so successful in securing, because they had all of these projects up at shovel-ready status. Now, if the Bunbury Geograph Economic Alliance could offer us the same project,
Purpose?
Yeah, so at the moment we're working on a regional prospectus, largely based off actually the Shire's idea to have its own advocacy prospectus. So my fellow mayor and presidents, we've sort of discussed things that are strategic projects from each local government. So I already had that information in our prospectus, and I did have the discussion at one of our round tables some time ago now though, about continuing that discussion, and we've sort of come with 5 regional projects that would change the sort of economics in the area. So from us, that's the agribusiness precinct, and the discussions around that have been good, is that it's taken some of the pressure of, one of the other local governments wants it, who's going to have it. So there's large agreement around that room that the Shire of Capel will proceed with something like that first. So Bunbury's got Amtrak, Dartup's pushing Monju, those sorts of initiatives. So that's looking at a regional prospectus to try and then draw federal funding in. At the time when it was the former government, federal government, it was targeted towards the regional deals side of things. Since it's Labor's come into power, it's changed a little bit, and have spoken to the Federal Minister's office probably about a month ago now. And they've got a new program. It's largely the same thing, but they're calling it something a bit different. So we're trying to get a regional document together to then go to the federal government and apply for that funding to bring it in under some sort of regional deal. So we are sort of working in that space.
Question. How often have you met since joining the Bunbury Geographic Economic Alliance?
Well, we sort of, I suppose, joined on a, we'll just let the Shire of Capel in. I've been meeting with them since pretty much I took on the president's role. They extended that invitation pretty quickly, and it sort of built from there. And I did make pretty clear at the start why the Shire of Capel originally left, and some of the expectations it would have coming back, that it would want to see tangible benefit. And it's probably remiss of me about how they haven't actually come and presented. So I'll take that feedback about providing more information to the council as well.
Question. So is that 2 times you've met? Because I was actually asking specifically how many times you've met since we've joined, since Capel joined.
Probably at least 10.
So 10 times in, is it 6 months or?
Well, since October 2021.
2021.
So 18 months.
6 times in 18 months. Okay. And question, how close is this document to being finalised?
Well, we had the meeting with the minister, about a month ago. So we've actually got a meeting tomorrow. We're all meeting again up in Harvey to go through that feedback and then proceed with how that document will be put together by the Economic Alliance.
Question, I don't know if you can answer it, but how much longer do you think it'll take that document to be put together to actually show us some...
Well, it's subject to the federal government and their funding arrangements. So they're still working out a lot of their detail. That should hopefully come forward by the time the federal budget is presented, which should be sort of May. We know that they've got a new name, which I think they call it Precincts and Regions deal. But there's not very much detail actually about what's the funding levels, who can apply. So it's contingent on a few things like that.
My concern is that we've got a state and a federal election coming up in 2025, and I was wondering whether we're going to see any action from all of this and from our $13,500 annually to actually get some decisions made before it's possibly a new government, state and federal.
Well, we can't present a document based on information we don't have, which is how the federal government of the day is going to operate. It's very much a desire to have it before an election, and try and actually get this funding under the programs that they have. But I think the election cycle is an opportunity that always comes around, and we present what we have then, and the Shire would make its own individual representation as well.
Thank you.
The Deputy President.
I have a question. Apologies to grill on this particular issue, but are you currently a board member?
No.
No. So, given every other local government who is a member has the Shire President as a board member?
No.
You won't receive a position on the board?
No,
That's
the
my
board.
question.
the board is made up of a limited number of members, 9 I believe, or 11. Not every local government has a representative. So where we sit is the local government executive committee. So that's where we have, and we sort of can operate underneath the board, but all decisions are passed back through them and they're aware of our activities.
So the City of Bunbury, Shire of Harvey, Shire of Dardanup and the Shire of Capel are listed as local government members. Their board includes the Dardanup Shire President, the Bunbury Mayor and the Shire President of Harvey. You are the only Shire President to not sit on the board.
Would be, yes.
So that's why I asked the question, would the intention be that you are a board member? But I think you are under the impression, obviously, that you wouldn't be a board member. You'd be on the LGA executive.
Which is made up of local. Suspend standing orders. You've already spoken, Councillor. Are there any further comments or questions?
Question, because I haven't spoken, I've only asked questions. Is it possible to suspend standing orders so we can have a discussion about Councillor Shoshana's further questions? Because I don't want this to go on forever, but I am very, very interested in this.
All right, I'll move that we suspend standing orders 10.1. Seconded by Councillor Andrew. All those in favour? Those against? It's carried 5-2. The Deputy President.
Yep, it's on. Yep. I just want to start by saying I still stand by my comment that I am confident that if the Shire President and the CEO see renewed value in giving this organisation a chance, then I am supportive at the time being of giving them a chance. And the situation or the product that they were delivering back in 2018 is very different to what they are delivering now. And having a look through what they have currently got, they are a greatly different organisation with a greatly different view, and they've got the reason I asked about the board question is that to answer some of the questions that Councillor Andrew had, so there's 4 local government members on the board, and there's quite a substantial number of large corporate industry partners that you probably wouldn't see on the Bunbury Economic, the Bunbury Geograph Chamber of Pay to be on that as well. So platinum large corporations, multinationals, are paying up to around about 20 grand. The City of Bunbury would be paying between, so they say /or hubs to deal with topical issues to the LGA. So admittedly, the Shire, and probably the question I forgot to leave off in the last round of questions, is whether or not we've provided any funds to this organisation since the Shire. So that saying no, we probably realistically haven't been entitled to those benefits. Realistically, their prospectus clearly states that there would be workshops or some sort of anything. And I see that point as us saying, well, we want you to come and workshop with the Shire to understand the council's greater economic views. So that's kind of all in the prospectus, and I think I say I put them on notice because these things can be a waste of money, but this seems to me to be an organisation that is genuinely interested in advocating for greater regional and economic benefit. Their vision is advocacy. Their mission is to lead economic development. So if part of the advocacy, it sounds to me like they're actually working on projects. My biggest red flag is that on the they list under projects, key projects, the two, and one of them is the Collie Futures Fund. Collie's not even, so the Collie Chamber of Commerce is an associate partner of the organisation. The Collie Future Fund, while it may be in Bunbury Geograph, is a small fraction of what we've got. So Bunbury Geograph Economic Growth Plan, which is fine. But look, again, I just come back, I understand why the President has wanted to give them a go. I think this is a far better organisation than what we left in 2018. I'm actually kind of genuinely a little bit excited about what they're doing. They're taking a really serious approach, but we need to have a keen eye. If we're not getting that funding out of them, our value, I think that's a concern. So.
Yep.
So my other concern, on top of what I've said previously and Councillor Sciano has just said, is that there's actually no financial details available on their website either about where their money goes. Brant Edwards, for example, is listed as the CEO of the Alliance. He's previously held very high up positions with Griffin Coal Mining and was the project manager at Collie Water. This chief executive position appears to be his only current employment position, and with all due respect, I doubt whether he has left a position as project manager at Collie Water and not be receiving a decent remuneration. And the fact that those financial records aren't available on their website concerns me.
Did you have a question, Councillor?
Give me the call, I can read them out for you.
The Deputy Shire President.
Industry partners are Albemarle, Southern Ports, Talison Lithium, Alcoa, South 32, Tronox, Bunge, West Pine, Perkins, Wattpress, AMD, SSWA, Veal Auto Parts, ECU, Premier Coal, RCR Mining Technologies and South Regional TAFE. Associate partners are FIFWA, Neon, Thompson Surveying, WA Offshore Wind Farm Proprietary Limited, Advician, KBS&G Australia, Breakaway Aboriginal Corporation, Bunbury Geograph Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Collie Chamber of Commerce and Industry.
Are there any further comments? Otherwise, I mean, we're still in standing orders, but I might just say, look, I can. Councillor
Ask
Noonan?
a question.
Yes.
Has the City of Bustleton been approached by the Economic Alliance, and if so, what's their status? Are they interested in joining as well? Because if Bustleton was in it as well, then it would become, I think it would have a to lobby governments.
I'm not aware of Bustleton having been approached. We have had discussions though about Donnybrook potentially joining, as they sort of fit in that.
Identify only Capel, Donnybrook, Collie, Dardanup and Harvey and Bunbury as the Bunbury Geograph Shires, and so they don't identify Bustleton, Margaret River, Nannup Bridge catchment area.
Councillor Mogg. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. All right. So I'll take that opportunity to speak on the. I understand the concerns and reservations of councillors regarding this, and they want a bit more information about what this is actually delivering for us. So my advice would be that this item F be withdrawn from, well, be amended out for this point in time. I am meeting with them in the morning. Right. Pardon?
Legislation, we do have to adopt this item before the end of the month. We have a time frame in terms of March and also bearing.
The item has been paid.
Yeah.
So I wasn't aware of that either.
That's why it's in here.
Right. All right, so in light of that, I'll take on the comments that the council's made around wanting to see a return for that investment, which has been made. And then by the time the budget comes up in a couple of weeks, or a couple of months' time, sorry, we will review the value of that membership. So does anyone have anything pressing? Otherwise, I'll move that we... So, Councillor Scano moving to reinstate standing orders. Seconded, Councillor Andrew. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried 7-1. We return to the substantive item. Are there any further speakers on that item? I'm not sure who hasn't spoken. There's no other speakers. I'll just reiterate that understanding the concerns of councillors, so we'll certainly review that going forward. And we'll bring some more information to council on that. Councillor Mogg, do you wish to close? I'll put that item to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? That item is carried 6-1. Right. 6.6, the compliance audit return for 2022. Is there a mover for that item? Moved Councillor Andrew. Is there a seconder? Councillor Mogg. Councillor Andrew.
Yes. So as chair of the audit committee, I'd like to firstly thank the time and effort and input of Dr. Parker. His wisdom and knowledge and experience was invaluable. The CAR was adopted on the 15th of March. The CAR, along with the minutes from the meeting on the 15th of March, will go to the Department of Local Government by the 31st. There's just a couple of items that I feel should bring people's attention to and just highlight them. So the two issues are, in the original agenda, you'll notice that there was a non-compliance issue about an annual return that wasn't lodged correctly. Since that agenda came out, that position has actually, or that issue has been revisited, and we've received confirmation that that person was compliant. There's the Director of Finance and Corporate would be able to probably explain a bit better, but if you it's my understanding that if you begin employment within a certain time frame before the compliant audit returns are due, then you don't need to redo it. So that person didn't redo it. It originally got flagged. It's not an issue. The second issue that was highlighted is in the car, and it's regarding the valuation that was provided for the disposal of the property for the Boyne Up sale yards last year. Obviously, so two issues attached to this one. Obviously, it was noted incorrectly on last year's car. We've received confirmation that because it has been over 6 months that it's noted as an error, but we don't have to do anything else. And we've obviously noted it on this year's car as well. But we have received confirmation from McLeod's that it doesn't affect the validity of the Boyne Up sale yards lease. And I think that's it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Mogg. Are there any speakers against the item? Speakers for? Any discussion? No. Councillor Andrew, do you wish to close? I'll put that item to the vote. Those in favour? And that's carried unanimous. Item 15.7, disposal of assets, lot 36 and lot 39, Ilmenite Crescent, Capel. Is there a mover? Councillor Mogg. A seconder. Councillor Sciano. Councillor Mogg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd just like to say when I came onto council, we were given a bus tour that I'd asked for, and it was to the sites in the Capel industrial area of these two properties. They had been on the market before, unsuccessful. They're vacant lots, as I understand, and they're not gaining the Shire rates or income for lease. So if the property is good, let's cross fingers it is, we can sell these properties, and hopefully with the money we could put it towards improving Spur Street and get the heavy haulage out of the main street of Capel, and a better heavy haulage route to the industrial area and the like, implement a design and get that going. So I fully support this motion and very pleased to see it come forward. Thank you.
The Deputy President. Yep. Are there any other speakers on this item? Councillor Dillon.
Thank you, Mr. President. While I'm not a great believer that we should, as a Shire, own sort of commercial properties, and I'm very happy to see this motion come to council, I don't believe it should be a fire sale. I would like to think that our residents and ratepayers would get a bit of value of disposal of such assets. But yeah, happy to commend this to my fellow councillors.
Are there any other speakers on the item? Councillor Mogg, do you wish to close? I'll put that item to the vote. Those in favour? And that's carried unanimous. (15.8) The Shire of Capel risk tolerances. Is there a mover for that item? Councillor Sciano. Is there a seconder? Councillor Mogg. The Deputy President.
No, I leave the item as read. It doesn't change the risk of things. It just identifies. It just changes how we identify them. The risk is still there, so I don't think it needs much more explanation.
Councillor Mogg. Are there any speakers for or against this item? No. Does the mover wish to close? I'll put that item to the vote. Those in favour? And that's carried unanimous. 15.9, the financial statements for the 31st of January 2023. Is there a mover for that? Councillor Andrew. A seconder? Councillor Dillon. Councillor Andrew.
No, I'll just move it as read.
Councillor Dillon. Is there any discussion on that item? No. The mover wish to close? I'll put that item to the vote. Those in favour? That's carried unanimous. 15.10, payments made during the month of February 2023. Is there a mover for that recommendation? Councillor Sciano. Is there a seconder? Councillor Tarantroy. The Deputy President.
Note them as read.
Councillor Tarantroy.
Just that I had multiple questions which were answered via email, so yeah, everything's good, thank you.
Are there any speakers for or against that item? No? Does the mover wish to close? I'll put that item to the vote. Those in favour? And that's carried unanimous. Item 15.11, the Arts, Culture and Heritage Policy. This has been withdrawn from this evening's agenda. 15.12, Policy Review Volunteers. Is there a mover for this item? Councillor Tarantroy. Is there a seconder? Councillor Mogg. Councillor Tarantroy.
Moved as read. I just want to say that it's a good thing that we've had a review of this volunteer policy because it gives the Shire staff more scope to be able to do things for the volunteers who volunteer for the Shire of Capel. Yeah, so great to see it. Thanks.
Councillor Mogg. Are there any speakers for or against the item? Councillor Dillon.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a couple of quick words, especially pertaining to point 12 in this motion about the Shire committing $5,000 through the draft annual budget, where basically members of the community can nominate a worthwhile volunteer, and they might get a little honorarium of up to $500 and join us out at the Elgin Hall or wherever we choose to have our volunteers breakfast. And just want to quickly shout out to the Capel Cemetery group who sent through a few questions via me for the executive team about point 13. Yeah, it's basically just the Shire just needs a little, I suppose, pressure release valve at the end of it, but it's unlikely we would ever need it, I would say. Thank you.
Are there any other speakers? No. Councillor Tarantoy, do you wish to close? I'll put that item to the vote. Those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Item 15.13, the Shire Policy Review 2.8 Purchasing. Is there a mover? Councillor Mogg? Oh, apologies. Just wanted to make sure Council's aware and those following along. There was a few changes to the policy by the officers, just an additional definition for additional purpose, and then municipal fund, just providing some definitions towards those. And then also in the purchasing requirements table, just a bit more information regarding Shire officers, who's authorised, and the required number of review officers to review. As well as a clause 12, any expenditure from the municipal fund that's not included in the annual budget. Right, so that was moved, Councillor Mogg. Is there a seconder? Councillor Sciano. Councillor Mogg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd just like to note and thank our Shire staff for a fantastic briefing we had on this. I feel it's fit for purpose for our Shire to just share a summary that procurement.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just had one quick query, and so it's a unique situation, but it was one I found myself in doing business, and I'll disclose I've never done business with the Shire of Capel, but doing business with other local governments and providing, at the time, a tourism video product with a television network. And our product was over the threshold of $5,000, and in a circumstance like that, you can't receive two quotes for that particular product. So I just want to, and I've tried to have a bit of a look through here, and I've had a look through here, and I'm just trying to identify, in a situation where we have a product that can't be provided by more than one supplier, and we can't get the second quote, or the third, or fourth, or fifth. What's the mechanism there? Now, I understand there is there's procurement around artwork, but this doesn't really identify that no quotation is necessary unless it was software support licenses or renewal. So I'm just probably wondering, in a circumstance like that, what do we do if we can't achieve the second quote?
Through you, Shire President, there is provisions within the regulations that allow for, I guess, exemptions from normal legislative arrangements where you, and there are.
Wanted to know, I'm presuming it's not specifically in there, but if it's covered by the regulations, then it's, yeah. So, all right, no, thank you for that. That's all good from me.
Are there any speakers? Speakers for? Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd just like to acknowledge the author. Now, that was John requiring having a good purchasing policy, so I'd like to acknowledge John Lucas for his work, and also the rest of the staff who...
Are there any further speakers for or against the item? No. Councillor Mogg, do you wish to close? I'll put that item to the vote. All those in favour? And that's carried unanimous. Is there any new business of an urgent nature? Nope. We now move to public question time. There being no members of the public in the gallery, we'll move on to motions without notice. Are there any? Nope. Are there any motions for